Dun, dun, dun.
And so the bartender says, "That's not a duck."
You tell the best jokes, Brain.
Oh, man. Oh, man.
Oh, no. It's happening. It's happening.
It's happening again.
Whoops. Little delay. Welcome back to Come and Brew It Radio. Coming to you from Texas Brewing Inc. in Haltom City, Texas. You can find us on the web at txbrewing.com and be sure to follow us on Facebook and share with your friends.
In this episode, we have David Clark from Main Brewing in studio with us to discuss the benefits and methods of record keeping to become a better brewer, along with the possibilities you can discover when you use flavor flights to see where you can take your beers. Main is a recent addition to the DFW brew scene that is currently serving a full tap list of craft favorites as they wait on their licensing to begin brewing. David has been blogging about beer for a long time and is also a member of the Casually Lit podcast.
But before we get started, please be sure to check out our Patreon account to help support the show. Every little bit counts, and if you visit patreon.com/Come and Brew It Radio, we have a variety of options for you to help keep the show going, get involved, and improve it. Also, every live show will have a giveaway for all our patrons, and at the end of each month, we'll be doing a monthly product giveaway for all our $5, $10, and $20 patrons. And this month, we'd also like to thank Casey Kirkpatrick and Moreno Lanza, all the way from Italy, for their patronage. Thanks, guys.
Yes.
Thank you.
Cheers.
I'm Brandon.
I'm Greg.
I'm Stubby.
And I'm David.
Woohoo!
Welcome, David.
Thank you.
I'd like to say a special thank you, actually, to Moreno Lanza, who sent us a very nice email.
He did.
And congratulated me on my grandson. I thought it was a cool note that he sent us. So, and he's from far eastern Italy. I looked it up where he's from, right on the border of Slovenia. So, in a kind of a region that you don't really know much about. I thought that was cool that we had a listener over there. And
All the way.
he was a very enthusiastic fan, so we appreciate that a lot.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll be getting something
Well,
to you, man.
that's what's crazy, man, is we have listeners in 40 different countries now, so pretty amazing.
Including Beeristan.
Puristan. Yeah, that was a big one. I
Right.
understand. Have they-
The vast majority of our listeners are from Beeristan.
and the women, though, you know, have a hairy upper lip and beer gut, you know. But
Yeah.
They all look good in beer stand.
The longer you're in country, the better they look.
beards and styles, you know. Anyway,
So
I digress.
TGIF. I'm glad to be here on a
Indeed.
Friday night. It's been a long week for me.
Yeah, it's been a while
and
since you've been in the studio.
It
too.
has,
too.
yeah. I've been busy. I've been traveling a lot.
Yeah, you too.
Yeah, missed the last one, both of us.
Yeah,
Which sounded like a really good episode, actually.
Did it
You
really?
guys had a good time, yeah.
Man, maybe we should not have you guys here more often then.
Ouch.
I'm just kidding.
My heart hurts right now.
So we've got a lot to talk about tonight, actually. We have a great guest in the studio. I like having somebody in here who not only has some radio experience, but also on the verge of opening up a new brewery and running a tap room and dealing with everything that comes along with doing that. So that should be fun to talk about. We have a really cool article regarding AB InBev and Goose Island to talk about. I've just been itching to talk about this since I first read it. And we're just going to kind of touch on that tonight because we're going to have the author of the book that the article references come in and talk about it. I
2
think,
weeks.
I think
Or a
it's
week,
really
yeah, 2
interesting to now be, 2 or 3 years removed from the beginning of all of these buyouts and be able to talk about why it is.
The recent buyouts.
Well, yeah.
Back in the 80s, they did the same thing.
The wave of buyouts that we've seen recently.
90s,
Yeah.
excuse me.
Yeah, I really like to be able to talk about the substance to why we have objections to it. I personally don't buy beer from breweries that have been bought out by AB InBev anymore. And it's not just because I think AB InBev makes crap beer or anything like that. I actually like some of their Miller Coors, some of their mainstream offerings,
Right.
and I buy them from time to time. I just have problems with what it does to the industry. And now we're actually seeing not only people coming out and talking about the effects of that, but we're seeing how it's affected the industry and those particular brands over time. And it makes me feel a little bit better about the attitude I've had about it and all that kind of thing. So we're going to get into that. I'm really happy to talk about that. I've been just the instant
jonesing.
I have, man. The instant I read the article, I said, "Oh, I can't wait to get on the air and talk about this." So
He's itchy anyway. Though.
Well,
yeah. I'm really itchy most of the time. Yeah.
What was your DJ name? HPV?
DJ Deuce Grunt.
Oh, Deuce Grunt. Okay.
Nice. I would say that rolls off the tongue, but I don't know if that's the proper phrasing for that. Yeah.
MCHPV and DJ Deuce Grunt.
Okay.
Yeah, cool.
Are they going to be in studio next time too?
And then I also brewed my challenge beer recently, and I tasted it the other night. It's not done. It's not ready to keg and bring in to taste, but I have a lot to talk about on that too. So, and we got a lot of things to talk about tonight. So,
Cheers.
yeah.
Let's
Let's
do it.
get to when we're talking about recent happenings. Let's talk about this article. And if anybody wants to
Right.
look it up and read what we're talking about, this was in Paste Magazine, which is
It's
I think
making
it's
the
just
rounds right now.
pastemagazine.com. It's making the rounds everywhere.
you read
And what
about
it is
homebrew.
an article about a book that was just written regarding the buyout of Goose Island, which was the first big buyout that happened with the AB InBev and Miller Coors buyouts that were going on. And to me is a perfect example of all of the things. It checks all the boxes of the things that are typical through the whole process here and the things I don't like. One of them being that when it happened, it like sent shockwaves through the brewing world because they were kind of the holy grail of beer up in that particular part of the country.
Right.
And then also you had all of the head brewer and the owner and all that coming out saying what we've heard over and over again since then,
Everything
which
will be
is
fine.
everything's going to be
Nothing's gonna
fine. Nothing's
change.
going to change. The beer will still be good. We just have more money to work with, all that. And then shortly afterwards, there was a mass exodus of all of the original people of the brewery. They all left. All the people who said, we're still going to stay around and run this, all left. And we never knew why. And we've seen it happen with Ballast Point. When that happened, it was all of those guys said they were going to stick around, and within less than a year, all of them left. And
Which
there's
is kind of
deletion.
interesting because a lot of those buyout, the clauses, they have to stay within a certain period of time.
right.
It's either that or like
Right.
a non-compete.
Yeah, non-compete.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Well,
a
we
lot of-
saw with Elysian, before that even happened, one of their owners left the whole thing completely and
Brewers
said, I
got
want
out.
no part of this. Yeah.
Right.
And so there's something to all that. And I think it also reflects on breweries like Wicked Weed and the people that stayed at Elysian and all that stay behind and begin to spit out this AB InBev propaganda that we hear. You remember that video that we talked about? And all
That was the only time I ever really got pissed until
Mm-hmm.
I read that video or watched that video.
Yeah.
And then I was like, man, F those dudes, man.
Well,
I
to
mean,
sit there and be insulted, you have your intelligence insulted by somebody like that. Say something that just obviously doesn't make any sense and act as though you're an idiot for thinking for yourself and just seeing what's there in front of you. Obviously, they're in front of you, So let's get into that a little bit. The article itself is 5 things I learned about AB InBev while reading Barrel Aged Stout and Selling Out, which is the book that's coming out.
By Josh Knoll.
By Josh Knoll. We're going to have him, or Noel, we're not sure yet.
Noel.
Josh Knoll or Noel. We're going to have him on the show on June 1st to talk about his book. But this article kind of distills what happened after the buyout and 5 takeaways that he had from it. One of the things that I had heard, and I was trying to remember the other day who I heard this from on some podcast or interview or something. I think it may have been Dr. Charlie Bamforth from Davis University in
UC
California
Davis.
that has the big brewing program there, where he had said something to the effect of, when it comes to brewing beer, AB InBev and Miller Coors and all of these, they can brew anything that you challenge them to brew.
Mm-hmm.
Any of these craft beers, they could duplicate it or put it
probably
out
make
just
it
fine.
better.
But they don't know how to sell it. And that was one of the reasons for these buyouts, is that they couldn't wrap their mind around the craft beer market. So if you can't beat them, join them kind of thing.
I think it is. I think that's what it is the people. The reason that people are buying that is because it is a local product.
They don't get it. They don't get it.
They don't understand that.
And to me, the takeaway for me from this article was that you have 2 different business models. One is a product-centric business model, and one is a marketing-centric business
Yes.
model.
Exactly.
And I see this in my industry, which is tools. Everybody knows DeWalt and Black & Decker, and they're the AB InBev of the tool world. and they buy out companies like Porter Cable. And I may be speaking Spanish or Latin or whatever to some people out there who are not tool guys, but people who are tool guys do remember back in the day, Porter Cable was
great tool.
The craft beer of power tools. You know, they were an American-made, really high quality, and they were focused on the product and really making a good product. And people knew when they bought their tools, they would last forever, and they were great tools. And Black & Decker bought them just for the name and completely ruined them because they just go at it from a marketing point of view. We just want this name is all. And now they're this plastic tool that you find at Home Depot that's just a piece of crap. And it's a shame to watch them destroy it. And that's one of the things that I thought when the Goose Island thing happened and everything is it's going to be a shame to watch what happens to these breweries as time goes on. And so one of the 5 things, let's go over the 5 things that he mentions in this article. The first one is that AB InBev put a guy in control of Goose Island who knew nothing about craft beer. So,
was that the guy that was head of like the high end or whatever?
Yeah, actually,
Bud
he headed
Light,
up the high-end division.
Okay.
And
that was that whole video. It was a lot of that was him.
Yeah.
And if you remember, not long after that video, the high-end division laid off like 100 people or something.
No,
like
it was
that.
more than that.
Was it?
Yeah,
it was a
in the
lot of
thousands.
people.
Yeah.
And the high-end division is kind of where the upper people from these breweries they were buying went to work.
Right.
And then they let them all go. In this particular case, they said this guy had been the VP of Bud Light.
Yeah.
So I guess within AB InBev, Bud Light is its own division. It's separate from Bud or whatever.
They're on Team Blue, not Team Red.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. And so they had like some big release party where they rained hops down upon the crowd and all that kind of thing. But this guy had absolutely no idea anything about craft beer or brewing. And one of the examples they gave was they gave the guy a beer brewed with rye. And he said, wow, I didn't even know you could use rye to brew with. Yeah. And this guy's heading up a craft beer division. So that's a perfect example of,
Well, and that's kind of the same thing that we had. One of the problems that we have here in Texas with the 3-tier system is because most of these guys that are distributors, they depend on the big 3, the BMC. And what happens is these craft breweries, the guys that are selling BMC are actually the same guys that are going to have to sell your product. So most of them don't even know how to sell your product.
Well, that's exactly right. And that's one of the points in here. Let's see. AB InBev gave Goose Island zero input on the brand's initial rollout. So Goose Island, what they wanted to do was do a measured rollout to all the markets and do it a little bit at a time to make sure that the distributors knew what the product was and how to sell it, that it wasn't the same thing that they had been selling before.
Exactly. Yeah.
And make sure that when these distributors went into these markets, they knew where to go to sell it, how to sell it, and how to talk about it. And do it a market at a time and kind of roll it out across the country. And AB InBev completely ignored everything they said and just put it out all over the country all at once. And
well, one of my favorite beers that they made beforehand, which I thought was fantastic, is Honkers.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're brewing it, I think somewhere in Colorado or something. It's not at the brewery anymore. It just doesn't taste the same.
And I think in that article I was reading through that, it said that they were expecting that to be kind of like a flagship coming out, and sales dropped like double digits.
Right, it did. Yeah,
Yeah.
They were talking about that, and then also how Goose Island IPA was a big flagship for them too.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was Honkers IPA and 312 were their 3 big flagships, and that Honkers tanked, 312 tanked, even though they had added a pale ale to the 312 brand. Mm-hmm. And that the IPA was flat, even though the IPA category in craft beer was up like 33% that year.
Right.
So, that just goes to show you that.
Well, I mean, to me, the reason I liked Honkers is because it was an English beer, and I think they took all the English out of it.
Yeah, flattened it straight
Well,
out.
yeah, exactly. Well, just like they
made
took
it
all the
boring.
Belgian out of Blue Moon.
Right.
There's
Yes.
nothing Belgian
Yeah.
about it. It's just full of coriander and orange peel, and there's no Belgian character or anything.
Right.
They put
It's a
flour
wheat
in it
ale.
to make it cloudy.
Yeah.
The other one was that it was surprisingly easy to get local and national media to look past everything happening. Now that I kind of
Fake news.
I attribute to the fact that it was the first one, and that the owner of Goose Island came out and kind of laid everybody's fears to rest initially. We're going to stick around. The beers are going to be the same. We're just going to have more money. It was the first time we had heard that whole rap.
It's the time frame.
Now we've heard it 20 times.
You know, actually, and that's funny though that you say that. And one of the things I really am truly a history fanatic because and they always say history repeats itself. Well, same thing happened in the '90s. Look up Pete's Wicked Ale.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
And they did the exact same thing to those guys. They just kind of ran them into the ground.
Pete's Wicked Ale was my favorite beer in the 90s. I loved it.
Yeah, and then there's place. I mean, even like Celis, they bought them out, and then they.
But there was a different definition, I think, of craft than there is now. And
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It's like I
That's
think
for sure,
that now
yeah.
there's a whole different audience for craft beer after the 90s and everything that happened. I think that was born there, but like it's broken out since because there were more breweries locally than there were than even in the 90s.
There was a few that survived, though. I mean, you think about it, like Sierra Nevada,
Right.
and Anchor
Yeah, but it wasn't many.
There were still so
many.
few for so long, but then it hit. And it's like even when they did that with the national local news thing, it's like to me it still wasn't hot enough yet for it to really hit that, to make that kind of impact that it would have now. Now when it happens, it's hot. It's across borders even. People who aren't craft beer people kind of realize that it means something,
Well, and I think, what, and this is not really homebrew related that we're talking about, but what I think it is that I think all homebrewers for the most part are craft aficionados or they just like to drink good beer.
Yeah.
And so to me, that's always been a big part. And it's such a close-knit group. I mean,
well, I think it is homebrew related in that it deals with the idea that you cannot fake the passion that people have for it. That homebrewers, that's how passionate we are about it, is we go through all the trouble to make beer ourselves when we can go out and buy perfectly good beer all the time if we want to. But we're so passionate about it. And so it means something to us. The beer that we're pouring out of this can right now, it means something that we know who did it and that they cared about how they did it and that
they started brewing in my store.
Right.
So.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
And that kind of leads us into the next point, which was the thing I thought was the most interesting, and I think a really good encapsulation of exactly what I mean by a company that puts marketing first as opposed to product first, and that was that AB InBev had no conception of where and when people drank craft beer. So basically, what they did,
timing
what they separated beer drinking into occasions.
Yeah.
So the occasions would be everyday food occasions, hanging out occasions, indulging occasions, partying occasions, relaxing occasions, and savoring occasions.
Savoring was
Wow. Someone got paid a lot of money to come up with that bullshit.
Oh man, a lot of money. You're right. And there were huge meetings, groups
yeah.
of people, lots of notes.
I like how many times that guy said occasions.
Right, exactly.
Give him a raise.
Somebody got really patted on the back for coming up with the word occasion, actually. That one word, it was like, yeah.
Occasions.
So even if you are going to do that, all of these occasions that they came up with, out of all of them, only one was Goose Island deemed appropriate for, and that was savoring occasions. So indulging occasions, like when you're eating, apparently Goose Island beer, an IPA,
you want a Bud Light for
or
that.
anything like that. Yeah, that was Bud
Maybe a
Light,
Blue Moon.
Bud Light Lime.
Oh, yeah. Oh, God.
Rita beers, Shock Top, and Stella
I like
Artois.
the Rita beers.
Right. And then, or everyday food occasions were Budweiser, Bud Light, Busch,
Yes.
and Busch Light.
Nothing like a
Busch
steak,
Light.
a great,
dude.
fantastic steak
So I
and
was
some
on-
Busch Light.
Speaking of Busch Light, I was on Twitter today, and Busch Light, their Twitter page, was actually retweeted somebody that said, "Hey, the best way to drink a Busch Light," and he's pouring it down in the drain or in the gutter, and it's just like he's going through it and deleting everybody else's and just leaving the people that like Busch Light. It was
Wow.
But
So
I mean,
the only place in this list that Goose Island made it was for savoring occasions. And that's also the only place where Leffe made it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which
Leffe.
I love Leffe.
Leffe's
I
good.
actually buy
very
that.
refreshing wit beer.
Until I read this, I actually didn't know that that AB InBev owned them. Actually,
Oh, you
that
didn't
really
know that?
disappoints
Yeah,
me
yeah.
because
Yeah.
I buy
Long
that
time.
beer all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Le Leffe Blonde, right?
Leffe Blonde. Yeah, I love that beer.
Long time.
So
They make a dual too. It's not bad either.
so they had absolutely not only no appreciation of all the things that can be done with craft beer and how the flavors fit and everything. They had no idea
How it all
who
works
drank
and
it or why they
yeah.
drank it. And they put millions of dollars into figuring out who drank it and why they drank it, and completely missed the mark.
Well, this is the same concept that goes with not knowing beer in the first place. And there's the market that doesn't know anything and has only been fed what has been marketed to them for years. Like a lot of us start that way, you know.
No, you're right.
What beers did I have growing up? All the beers that were mentioned in that, other than like Rita beers and things that didn't exist, but like Bud Light, Budweiser, whatever, Rolling Rock, Coors Light, Keystone Light, things like that. That's you thought that was beer. You didn't realize that the only other beer was like Guinness.
Right.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Newsflash. Do you think that's why Northern Brewer was bought out by AB InBev? To learn the consumer better, maybe?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And my guess is they're going to take all that valuable data and completely screw it up. Based on what I read here,
It's like, guys,
they
we're gonna have to come up with some
absolutely
new
no idea what
occasions.
they're doing. Because, I don't think there's anybody to challenge any of the ideas in those rooms. It's the same people that already came up with the ideas they had. They figured these aren't working. We need new ideas. Then use the same people to come up with the new
You
ideas.
can only have
you know?
like 20 or 30 VPs of whatever
That's
in a
right,
room,
yeah,
so, you know.
Well, it's
That's interesting because, you know, for you guys that don't know that, don't buy from Northern Brewer. Anyway.
Or Midwest Supplies, which are
Right,
the same
same-
company.
same thing.
And they're both owned by AB InBev.
But I don't. That's what's really strange. 2 years now after they've been bought out, I'm still not completely sure why that happened.
I think it's still market disruption.
You
With the
think?
same concept of they're going to start buying and making things so much cheaper that it is difficult
Right.
for you to do
Right.
the business that you want to do. you know?
Right. And either that or well, it's really strange because they've
To
tried to
shape
do
thought.
they've tried to do like some Goose Island clone stuff, but
Look at how much they spent on breweries they bought. All right.
Right.
I guarantee you that buying them out was a fraction.
Oh, yeah.
That's not even a blip on a balance sheet.
Yeah.
I don't
for
know though,
them.
man. You think I
For
I
the
realize
amount
that.
they spend on market research, that's maybe the cheapest
Yeah.
market research they've ever paid for.
Yeah, maybe. But I know this at the annual. I don't pre AB InBev. They were doing 53 million a year, so it wasn't a small operation, really. By any
So
means.
they probably paid 150, 200 million for them.
Yeah.
They paid $1 billion for Ballast Point.
Right.
Well, that wasn't AB InBev, but
No, that was Constellation, but that's what breweries are going for. Lagunitas was huge. That was that Miller Coors?
That was
no,
yeah,
that was
that was
Heineken.
Heineken.
Heineken, yeah.
Because first it was a partnership, an even partnership. I'm
Oh,
staying
yeah.
on. Then it's like,
Yeah.
okay, wait, no, I like money.
Now we've decided to 100% partner with them. Yeah.
Yeah,
and we've
of
said
course-
this a million times. You can't blame those guys,
you really can't.
man. I mean,
No. And at that point, I'm not holding it against them. I'm holding it against the new owners. And this is exactly why. And this is why I loved this article, is because it was hard to put into words and to quantify it at the time and give any concrete reason, because nothing had actually happened yet. But you just know from the way a company acts that what they're doing is definitely not in the best interest of something that you feel passionately about.
well,
And now we're actually seeing
and I think that's a perfect point here in Texas. If you're local here in Texas, is that we made some headway, and then people turned their back for 5 minutes, and
Yeah.
boom, and they took 2 steps back because it was kind of funny because I saw this. I saw the Brewers Guild really pushing that about, hey, you need to get your congressman or your you got to get these guys to not vote for this, blah 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 blah. And I think everybody kind of just dropped the ball, whereas everybody.
Did you
really
call
got-
your congressman, Stubby?
I can't say I did. So I mean,
I
I'm part
emailed
of the
him.
blame,
I
but-
called and emailed.
I emailed.
yeah.
but
Yeah, had a
but
nice little phone conversation.
but the thing is that
And Connie Burton. she
everybody
stood up for
kind
it,
of everybody kind of got comfortable, and then the big distributors came in and go, hey,
Well, somebody got paid.
Somebody-
Let's just
yeah.
say it. Somebody got
As
paid.
always, yeah.
You know, it's a bunch of crooked backdoor dealings. That's all it is. There's no way to justify. And to give anybody a background on what we're talking about here, last year there was a law enacted where breweries that were selling on site basically have to pay a royalty to distributors. So it's the
It
same.
never leaves the brewery.
It's the
It
same
never
as
goes
if
to the
they
distributor.
sell the beer to
Yeah.
the
But they have to
distributor
buy.
and
In
then
their-
buy it back
yes.
from the distributor.
They have
But-
to write an invoice for what they
But
take
they
out of
never
their
actually
cooler.
do sell it to them or buy it back. It never
it
leaves
never
the building.
changes hand. To move a crate of my own beer across my brewery on my own cart.
Right.
I have to pay someone hush money, basically.
Right,
Or not hush
exactly.
money,
It's
but a
Basically
bribe.
like a tax.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like,
It's
oh,
not
you're
even a tax. It's straight up protection money.
Yeah.
It that's like the mob. It really is.
Yeah, it's like
Something bad's going to happen here, but
it'll
we'll
be
make
a
sure
real
it
shame
doesn't
if one of
happen.
your kegs just opened up.
Right? Yeah.
yeah.
It's the most crooked, backwards. I can't even say enough bad things about it.
Yeah, I know it is bigger breweries, however, but it's still.
Well, I mean,
Well,
it
crap.
de-incentivizes
Well,
anyone who's in a growth mode. Like,
But
why would I
remem-
ever get close to that limit?
Right,
Then I'm
threshold,
just
yeah.
Well,
signing-
It's gonna
remember,
cut you,
anybody-
cut you at the knees.
Anybody
Yeah.
who had a
So-
shareholder who also
Yeah.
held shares in those larger breweries, it affected them too. So
Yeah, so if you had an investor
an investor, yeah,
that happened to own some AB InBev shares, you're out. You couldn't do that. So
Right.
that's bull crap. So
So we're going to have the author of that on to talk more about it. I'm really interested about that. But
it's probably gonna be a
This
really
whole
long
book, yeah.
episode.
yeah, I think it's really important though that we talk about the
It's going to be a dense episode of information because that's also our turning point beer episode, our recap.
Right.
Of,
So if you guys haven't seen the premise of this show, we went out to Turning Point, and they're pretty much they do, I would say 90% New England IPAs.
and they're awesome.
They're killing
we
us,
have some
yeah.
copies happening.
And so you I know we've had them on before, and it was a really popular episode. So
I had fun.
if you if you guys have a chance, go to the Come and Brew It Facebook page, and you can actually watch it. We had 2 home brewers come in and set with these guys, and not really give them a recipe, just give them some guidance on how to make a New England IPA.
To do it at home.
Yeah, to do it at home. And then so we're going to come back and see what these guys came up with. And
2 of the
discuss
more
it.
capable brewers in the DFW area.
Three.
Oh, was it 3?
Yeah, Jeremy
Freeland and-
Sanders.
Oh, was
and-
Jeremy
yeah.
too? Oh,
Yeah.
so yeah, definitely 3 of the most awarded brewers.
Yeah, so if you guys are interested in that style, be sure to tune in to next week. So.
June 1st. June 1st, not next
That's
week.
going to be a
June
good
1st.
episode. Yeah.
Everything should be working out towards that. So it's going to be a fun, a very information-packed episode by the end of that one. So we hope for the best.
But I think it's important to make sure that when we spit hate for big beer all the time, and it's not just like we're calling their beer piss water, because I honestly don't think it's piss water. I think their beer has a place. I think if people enjoy it, that's great. It has a lot more to do with the substance of what they do to our industry, and so
Right.
it's
Exactly.
important to hit on that stuff. And that'll
Especially
be interesting to talk about.
like the AB InBev. I mean, I think there's even differences between the mega corporations that come in and do what they do. There's some of them that just are so stripped down and soulless that they destroy everything that they touch.
And we didn't get into the 5th point, which had to do with that, which was that they've been fined over and over again all over the world for violating all kinds of laws and regulations, because if they can get away with it, they'll do it. And they have so much money, fines don't really even mean anything.
Yes,
to them.
exactly.
Well,
So-
I mean, to think about it, if let's just say, I can make $1 million, but it's going to cost me $100,000 fine.
Right.
Big problem.
Darn.
Darn.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, and we're going to get free publicity for it. Yeah.
Well, it's like the steroids argument in baseball. It's totally worth it to do steroids.
If you get-
You're going to make
you know-
$250 million, but have a 50-game suspension? Okay,
yeah.
I'll do that.
Funny thing about contracts.
Right, yeah.
Now, the biggest myth that people have been sold about beer is that it's yellow beer versus craft beer. Beer is beer.
Yes.
American Light Lager is a style
Right.
of beer. Craft beer just means that there's a bunch of different styles that are not constantly smashed in your face and sold to you. The actual, David versus Goliath of craft beer and big beer is, you could buy a 6-pack of Bud Light, or you can buy a 6-pack of an American Light Lager produced by your neighbor who is going to now be able to pay his mortgage.
Right.
Right.
Like, you can send your money to Belgium. That's totally fine, and it's your dollar to do that with. God bless America. But I would rather help Sean or Jeremy or Wade or like these people that I really like.
And even beyond that too, that when they're crafting that beer, what they're designing, the recipe, the brew day, the fermentation, the packaging, everything that they're doing is with the focus of how do I make sure what comes out of that bottle is exactly what I want it to be, what I think people are going to enjoy, what I think is a quality product. It
from
represents
a local entity,
my philosophy and that kind of. And instead of there's going to be something in that bottle, but the shape of the bottle is the most important thing, and the color of the label.
Also the tits.
Right.
Yeah,
can we convince
everything.
people that they'll see tits if they open this bottle?
Man, I wish I could see tits when I open a beer.
I'll show you my tits right now.
Which beer is this?
I mean, just say please.
Right.
It's magic
We can have a
word.
whole room full of tits real quick.
I'm
Oh,
sure
this
you,
is on video, yeah.
I'm sure you guys out there have seen this in your local communities too, and I think this is important. One of our first local craft beers here in DFW was, Raw Brewing.
Yes.
And I got to say that where they when they started over there where they're at, it was the absolute ghetto. It was scary over there. And
yes, indeed.
That wasn't even that long ago.
It wasn't.
Even when they were fully up and running, and we were over there doing Iron Mash, there was
it was sketch.
Yeah.
But
Doug Zent had a homeless guy come in and be on our Iron Mash team one year. And we're like,
I remember that.
Doug, who is this
awesome.
guy?
You got built-in mascots.
but if you go over there now, man, it's been totally gentrified now. It's nice.
Yeah.
There's
It's
big
getting
high
there.
rises
It's getting
are
there,
coming
yeah.
in.
And a lot of the reason is because they are there.
I think,
Absolutely, yes.
I think they were kind
Well,
of
I
the
was sitting
pioneers
in
of that area.
Hop Fusion and in Collective tonight and explaining to somebody from out of town about how that area is just really up and coming economically, and it was the breweries that did it. There's nothing else there that spurred that,
Right.
And I guess maybe a
Dickies.
craft beer bar or two
Food,
also did it.
Craft
But
beer, and food, but those all definitely went hand in hand.
Right,
because, like,
exactly.
you can go drink at a brewery, but it'd be really nice to, like you said, have a steak and maybe not drink a Busch Light with it.
But it's
I don't
so
know,
good
man.
with
Yeah.
the steak. I mean, it's
I have a
sets
hard
it
time
off.
picturing steak without Busch Light.
You need
big
yourself
old
some
can.
top sirloin, a good old bottle of ketchup, and a Busch Light.
32-ounce can and a steak.
Is the Busch Light, is that just kind of like the little strip? I mean, is it,
Meat and
Yeah,
Bush.
the
Tale as
landing
old as
strip,
time.
yeah.
are we talking about strip?
The Hitler
steaks?
mustache?
Steaks?
Strip
Yeah.
steak.
Okay, yeah,
You
that's
joke.
There you
They're
go.
probably listening right now, and you watch. That's going to be their hazy
You-
IPA, landing strip hazy IPA.
That's a good
Copyright
one. I like
Texas
that.
Brewing Inc. 2018.
Little Man in the Boat. Lager.
That's probably from Belching Beaver.
Are they still around?
I think so, actually.
Christ,
Yeah.
that's a real thing.
yes. There's actually a
It's out in
brewery.
West Texas.
Belching Beaver.
No,
No,
it's in
no.
San Diego
San Diego.
called Belching Beaver. Yeah.
Oh no. Okay, what's the?
There's
There's
another
a West
one in
Texas.
Colorado.
that one
too.
went out of business.
That
Wicked
one
Beaver.
went out.
Wicked Beaver.
Wicked
Was
Beaver.
that Wicked Beaver? Okay, all right.
Yeah.
There's another
No.
beaver-related one in Colorado in Longmont, I think, too, or Loveland.
Yeah.
I can't remember. But
I'll never forget the first time I did that, and I was like, I called my wife and I said, "Hey, they've got a brewery
beer.
here called Belching
Really good
Beaver.
beer.
I think we should open one called Farting Pussy, but
with a picture of a cat that has
yeah, gas.
gastric
Yeah,
issues.
Yeah, exactly.
Pussy fart pale.
Oh, shit. Well, we are going to come back to all this discussion again, and I know that some of you appreciate it, so hopefully we can get a lot of detail out of the author for that one.
Well,
and get some real history
yeah.
behind what started this and the current version of the craft beer and AB and like the mega corporation war.
And I'm
so.
sure most of you guys out there had actually heard of it, or maybe seen it floating around on social media. If you have some questions that you may want us to present to the author of this, it's actually not the article, but
the actual
guy that,
book.
Right.
the guy that actually wrote the book. Send them to us. We'll be happy to maybe convey some of those questions.
Yeah, please.
Send those to info@texasbrewinginc.com.
Yeah, we want to hear from you because the book, what was barrel aged stout and selling out. So by Josh Knoll, you can actually pre-order it now as well. On
Actually,
Amazon,
the day he's coming on is
Yeah,
actually
June
going
1st.
to be
yeah.
the release date. So
But to move on, we have some unsolicited answers to internet questions. Brandon's favorite category.
The cat is out of the bag. We've been saying Reddit.
What should we go with this one? Do we just want to do one right now?
Let's start off with the barley wine one because I really like that one.
Yeah.
All right.
What is that?
Beginning of that.
Isn't that
Right,
from
so-
Queefing Jackalope Brewing?
Saving a.
It's
here-
queeping, dude.
The
It's
question.
queeping.
It's actually pronounced quaffing.
Savoring.
Savory.
That's an occasion right there.
Saving a flat or 7-month-old barley wine with champagne yeast or WLP 001 yeast? Question mark. 7 months ago, I brewed a big barley wine, about 12% alcohol. I've been tasting a bottle at several intervals, and honestly, I'm a little bit disappointed. The first bottle I tasted after 1 month of bottling, and it was terrible. There was absolutely no carbonization, and the beer was
Carbonization?
way too sweet. 3 months later, I
Sorry.
tasted the second bottle, and there was a tiny bit of carbonization, but still the beer was way too sweet. And then 3 months later,
Are you saying that shit, or is that what it says
that's
on
what
there?
it says.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
And that's what I'm saying from now on.
Carbonizification.
That's the word now.
3 months later, the beer tastes still the same as 3 months earlier. It's way too flat, even for a barley wine. I'm thinking my bottle yeast died or is inactive, and I tried shaking and storing it. And what is 25 degrees Celsius?
That's warm.
70.
Yeah, it's like
something.
75.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So I've been thinking maybe I can get more fizz and convert more sugars by inserting some
what?
champagne yeast
Fizz.
Oh,
or
thanks.
using some
Something else.
001 California Ale or something
Jizz with fizz.
to get the that is Brandon's
Carbonization.
Reddit handle, by the way.
That's my Reddit name, yeah.
So to get the fermentation started again, could I experiment with say 2 or 3 bottles to see if it works? What would you guys advise? Leaving the beer like this is also an option, but I'd rate it 4 out of 10.
I could feel Stubby crawling out of his skin while reading this.
Yeah. Well,
This happens to a lot of brewers.
It
It's
does.
why we chose
Yep.
this question.
And
so.
and there's this misnomer out there on the internet too that adding champagne yeast to things just solves all your problems, and it drives me
doesn't.
crazy.
It doesn't. And as a matter of fact,
It's the least capable thing you could
Yeah.
add at that point.
well,
really.
yeah. So, we had Kevin Lane in from Fermentus multiple occasions. Oh, by the way, he wants to come on again.
Okay,
He has
cool.
Lots of stuff to talk
Anytime,
about.
man.
So one of the things that
Fucker
we
needs to text me. Supposed to brew, damn it.
so anyway, he actually he addressed that situation.
Yes, he did.
With a lot of people don't realize that champagne. When you make champagne, everybody considers that it's high alcohol, but it must be able to break down anything, right?
Or just that it does well in high alcohol environments,
Right,
which
right.
I guess it does.
It does. That's it in high pH situations. However,
Right.
it does not break down any maltotriose. So
Or
Yeah, it doesn't turn unfermentable sugar into fermentable.
Yeah,
right,
yes.
right. Well, that's kind of that's kind of one of those things, though. A lot of people don't understand is, you have
Didn't he say that it
monosaccharides.
doesn't even work on maltose? That it's only simple sugars? It's not even disaccharides. I thought he said.
It may be.
Yeah, I thought he said it was
I
just
thought
like
it was maltotriose. It couldn't break
sucrose
down.
and
So-
glucose were the two that it would.
It could break down. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I mean, you think about it. Wine is just simple sugar.
It's just simple sugar. That's it. Yeah.
And it can tear through that. And if you're trying to break down stuff further, let's say your mash temperature is too high or yeast sucks or whatever, champagne yeast is not going to do shit for you.
Yeah, dump some bread, see
Right.
what happens.
Yeah,
But-
well,
That's
Oh, yeah.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
you can do that. I've had some people say you can add Beano, but I don't know how well
Well,
that
it's the
even
same concept of
works.
what
It's-
Kevin's talking
yeah,
about. So
yeah, but it's the Beano actually helps you break down some of those long chain sugars. But
Right.
I don't know. I think at that point you're just screwed. It's better to be proactive rather than reactive. And I think you've heard me say this a million times. It's all about yeast management, building
Yep.
starters, pitching enough yeast, having enough oxygen, because once you get down to that, and the same thing goes for when you're carbonating your beer too. If you don't have enough, and I promise you, when I'm doing anything over 8, 9, 10%, I'm repitching yeast if I'm doing bottle conditioning anyway.
Yeah.
And the reason being is that yeast is just wore out. You're going to have
But you need yeast that's designed for that.
yeah.
And that's I think the main thing about this is that a 12% barley wine that's fully fermented is an incredibly toxic environment for yeast.
oh yeah, it's whack.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things about it that Eric, like
we
that.
were going to
wiggity
nonchalantly
whack.
pass
So
that.
whack.
That was
It's
just
wiggity whack.
Wiggity whack.
No, but it's there's so many things about that environment, from alcohol to pH to lack of nutrients to lack of oxygen, all that is just a terrible environment, especially at 12%.
Well, if you got a yeast that's already fermented out something to 12%, that yeast is done.
yeah, it's
man.
gone through its
Yeah.
cycle. It's gone through its reproduction, and it's gotten tired.
Yeah, so hey, that's when you need
You
to
just
really
defined me,
repitch.
by the way.
and you know, David said something that I
Oh, you
think
just finished your cycle, huh?
is perfect. David said something I think is perfect. The only fix that is like, hey, I'm going to throw see if it works, that I've ever had consistent luck with is Brett.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a completely different beer at
It's-
that point, for
it
sure.
is, yeah.
But it comes down to what yeast is still alive, how much available sugar, either unfermentable or fermentable, or you know, like you said,
Right.
polysaccharides, things like that, are available for a healthy yeast for you to pitch. That a healthy yeast that needs to go through its own starter and its own reproduction and get ready to do its job. It's basically it's the night shift coming in to clean up
Right.
after.
Well, Brett will operate in that horrible toxic environment,
Right.
and it'll chew through
Thrive.
things that regular yeast won't.
And actually, you get more Brett
That's
character.
the character that you know Brett for is from that horrible toxic environment. If
Yeah.
it's not stressed, you don't get that Brett character.
Yeah, like I don't. A lot of these guys do the 100%, Brett fermentations. They just don't turn out as well as, maybe adding it at the end or doing a blend or something like that.
Right.
You know?
Well, you get two different things with those, though.
Yeah.
Right.
You're getting a whole nother animal with 100% versus the finished product,
I
which
just-
you like that nice finishing touch of Brett.
Right.
Totally different.
See, the other thing to that too, though, is we're talking about a guy who has all this beer in bottles, and he's wanting to open up the bottles and put something in it that's going to fix it, and then close the
Wait.
bottles again. I also would not put Brett in that.
No.
Yeah.
Because you don't know how far that Brett's going to go, and
You
you
don't
can
know how
blow
much
it up.
you're putting into each bottle.
The only way I could think at that point, if you had to do that, get you some sanitized tweezers, pop the cap, drop you some granules out of like a CBC one, recap it. That's about
Yeah.
your best.
I
luck.
think you'll have to add sugar, though.
You think so?
Probably.
Well, I mean, if you've already had this, you've already added
CBC's not
sugar.
going to chew through something that your regular
Yeah,
yeast.
yeah, that's what it's made for. It's made for bottling conditions. So
Yeah, but you have to add sugar
Well,
when
you
you're
add
bottle
sugar.
conditioning.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
he would have to add sugar to his bottles, I think.
well, he already.
Well, I
added
guess
it,
he already
correct.
did, yeah,
right.
yeah.
It just didn't get consumed.
Yeah.
right.
But that's still a dicey proposition, I think.
Yeah, you're
Well,
giving you're giving it one more opportunity to either get infected or improper dosing rate or all
Right.
kinds of
I
stuff.
think, but
Although this guy at this
that's-
point sounds like he's at the point of I'm going to pour this out if I can't. So
Well,
it's
and
not.
see, I think when you're at this stage, this is the stage that it's actually worth taking the extra effort, and you are going to run into oxidation with this. But to open every single bottle and as slowly and easily as possible, put them into a bucket and
And try
blend
again.
in some yeast and get everything evened out, and then rebottle it all. I mean,
I've
Keg it.
had some success.
yeah.
I've had some success putting in just putting a little bit of CBC in each one before.
No, I agree with that totally.
That's-
I'm just
that-
saying, like, if as bad as he has it,
Oh
you
man,
know.
if you put it in a bucket, it's going to be done.
Yeah, did he
It's
say
gonna
what
be-
size his
it's gonna
batch is?
taste like it's going to taste like cardboard.
did.
I think he's already going to have the issue with that. though.
Right.
But
I mean, there's
you know,
always marinating.
the thing too is when you're going to brew a
Worms.
beer like this, if
Worm
you're going to
food.
do a 12% barley wine, that is something you need to plan for.
Yeah.
Right.
When I go to bottle this, what am I going to do to make sure this works? And planning for it includes ruling out champagne yeast and ruling out WLP001.
Yeah, if you're planning for failure, it's even stupider than planning.
Right. And it's, a lot of people just don't know because there's a lot of stuff on the internet
Well,
about
and
champagne yeast.
I've tried using champagne yeast and some other. Well, I've tried using the CBC in sour beer.
I've done that, yeah.
That didn't work out
at
as
all.
well.
Yeah.
That's might be
pH.
where you would use
Probably,
champagne yeast,
yeah.
but you're not trying to finish it out. You're just trying to carbonate it at that point.
Mm-hmm.
I like the idea of the kegging for that more than anything, because
Sure,
at
that
least the
solves
good
your
thing is
carbonation.
You could purge the hell out of a keg.
He's gonna, you're gonna have CO2 in the keg. You're gonna still suffer some oxidation, I'm sure.
I've
But
done that
if you put it
before.
all in there,
It's okay.
all at once, purge it all out, kept
Drink
doing
it
it,
fast.
kept doing it, you're gonna at least know that it's forced
And
carbed
then
and
drink
done.
it.
So,
Drink it. Don't sit on it. Drink it. You know.
as much as a barley wine could cost, it might be worth
Yeah.
buying that one keg just to
That's a
do
good
that. It's
Yeah,
making
but-
some space
but-
in a French fridge.
Even a little bit of oxidation in barley wine is not bad. So
Right.
Right. Yeah, you might actually kind of get that aged effect
quicker.
right away. Yeah. Yeah. But that, anytime you're going to bottle condition a high alcohol beer, do a lot of planning and thought before you bottle it. Don't just throw it in the
Yeah.
bottle
And it all starts at the beginning too. I really think if your beer doesn't finish out or you don't, it's all about having enough yeast. Not you guys can't. I preach on this all the time.
Yeah.
That is what makes your beer is the
Yeah,
yeast.
it absolutely is.
You're just creating an environment for it to live in. So, don't deny that. And you're not going to have a good high alcohol beer unless you do that properly.
Yep.
I get off my soapbox now.
Actually, I thought we got that through rather painless. I thought when I read that, I thought, oh man.
I was crawling.
Well, there's
I
a
guess
couple of
that's-
hot buttons in there. Is all it is.
and the thing is I can't tell you how often I get that question.
Yeah.
It's a daily thing. It's, oh, hey, Stubby, I did a barley wine, and I pitched 2 smack packs of yeast, and it didn't finish. It stayed at 10:30, and it's flat. And I'm like, oh, my God. Constant. And you can't just pitch liquid yeast in a beer like that.
No.
I don't even give a
You need
damn
to
if
start.
it is. Even if it is 2 packs of yeast, it's not enough. So, anyway.
It's really hard to over pitch on a barley one, especially.
Well,
Especially on a homebrew level.
on a homebrew
Yeah.
level.
Yeah.
It's, well,
And on something that's going to take some time and condition, all of your issues of over pitching yeast pretty much go out the window. Just err on the side, do a starter, use O2, have good practices. It's a barley wine. You don't do a barley wine every single week.
Right.
Take the time and put some effort into it.
No,
Well,
you're right about that.
and
yeah.
you're spending a lot of damn money.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like 2 to
they're
3 times
expensive,
more
yeah.
expensive than just normal
Save
your
it.
everyday.
Right.
And really, I think we need to kind of do away with the entire concept of over pitching on a homebrew level
It's
anyway.
impossible because
Right.
you're not. The only time it really affects you is when you're repitching.
Or if you're in a large conical where you're going to have a bunch of it settle in the bottom and there's a ton of pressure on the top of it and you
Right.
get some autolysis. On a commercial level, maybe you have to worry about that. You are never going to have to worry about that in a bucket.
Right.
No.
And I think even from what I understand is it only when you get over 4 generations anyway. So
Really?
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
it's not because you always look at mutation, but at homebrew it's like impossible to pitch too much. So
the exception to that would be maybe if you're talking about like a Weizen yeast or some of the Belgian yeast
well,
where
You want a little stress.
some of the esters and that kind of thing come from
Right.
the,
Yeah.
but that's getting into some minutia there too. As a
could go down
general
a rabbit hole down
rule, pitch more yeast than you think you need to, and you're going to be okay.
Yep.
So what's the other one we want to talk about here? We've got a few of them. You want to do the Whirlpool one, or
I think actually the one that kind of caught me was the talking about whether or not he should add things into the secondary for
Okay,
fruit
okay,
or oak and whatnot. The guy basically asked a question about what he wants to do with adding something to secondary, and he says, "I know that general home brewing community agrees secondary fermentation is as out of style as frosted tips for general clarity and getting it off the yeast cake, but I haven't found consensus on whether secondary fermentation is necessary for things like dried fruits like apricots and oak chips, as this recipe calls for. Is racking to secondary in this case necessary or not?"
so what this guy's doing is a saison. He wants to do it for 2 weeks, move it to secondary, add apricots for 2 weeks, and then add oak chips for 1 more week, and then bottle it.
So it's fruit and wood, and he wants to do all like. My thought on this is like you can do this in the primary, but the problem with that is how much yeast cake you have and what could be dropped in the bottom of that could just immediately be buried by yeast cake if you're adding oak chips and fruit. Fruit should float and you should deal with it. It should be fine, but oak chips don't always float as much, and you might lose some into the yeast cake that if you actually did put it in secondary, you'll get more out of, especially if you finish primary at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you put a clear beer into a secondary fermenter with the things that you want to add those additions into. I think that's a great idea for what you're talking about. You'll get the most out of it. It will work in primary, though. You'll get a lot out of it.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly the right answer, because his question is secondary necessary or no?
Right.
Secondary is not necessary. You're going to brew a beer, and it's going to have the flavors in it and, that kind of thing. But will it be better with a secondary? Maybe with something like this. And part of the reason I say that, I think, is because he's talking about oak chips and apricots, and he's assigning a time period to those two things when you really don't know how long that's going to take. Oak chips, you might need 3 or 4 weeks on those.
Right.
Not
how big are the
week.
chips? How big are the apricot pieces that you're putting in?
Yeah.
Did you chop it up into tiny bits?
Right. And so I would never take
It's like the poop knife.
Oh,
Wow. That came out of the blast from the
Oh,
past.
I thought you said shit, not chips.
And then he talked about some of them floating, some of them sinking. I was right there with the poop knife. That was definitely
right on top of it.
poop knife is a myth. That there is no one who has ever had a poop knife in their house. I'm just saying that right now.
But will you grant that at least everyone's thought of that?
No, I will not grant that. I literally had never thought
Man,
about
you're not
that
living your
before.
life, man.
Boom.
No,
But back to homebrew.
but where I have
Ruined.
where I have a little bit of an issue with this is just
Can you imagine what you could get when you stir your homebrew with a poop knife?
Oh man, don't even say Whirlpool.
I've had that beer before, I think.
Yeah, me too.
I've had that in my glass a couple of times. Yeah, that's good, man. I'm going to go over here now.
Leave me alone.
Your buddy James brought one of those to the meeting one time.
Oh, yeah.
It
Oh,
smelled like somebody's shit in a bottle.
oh yeah. And then he
It was
he
bad.
acted as though it was a punishment for me. Like, here, drink this. And I'm like, why the hell did you give that to me? And he's like, see, I told you. And I'm like, what?
I was like, how did you shit in that bottle?
Yeah.
It's
I know
amazing.
exactly which one
You're
you're talking
talented.
about, too. Yeah.
Your skills are beyond compare.
No, but this idea that you're
He
going
had
to
the
write
runs
this
that
out
day.
and say, I'm going to put these apricots in for 2 weeks and this oak in for 1 week and stick to that, that's not really how it should work. You should put them in and taste it.
Yeah, it's
and
always
know
about the
when to
taste,
take it
yeah.
out, and
this also
maybe after you've done it a couple times, you'll be able to know how long it needs to be in there. But
I was about to say this seems like a really good case of split the batch and see what happens.
yeah, that's
And-
a good
Right.
point.
Yeah. And take notes on it, keep track of it, and then do it again. See,
And
change
that's
one
an
thing.
argument for a secondary, to take it out of the primary and put it in the secondaries and split them. And yeah,
Everyone
that's
always thought because reading old like Papazian and all kinds of things, like secondary is just this is the way you do it. This is in the book. This is how you do it.
Has
And
to
then
be.
when people realized if you just take care of your fermentation better, primary is really all you need. He's asking if it's necessary. Secondary is still a very valuable tool in a homebrewer's
It is.
tool shed. It's just you have to have really good sanitation, cleaning, and everything like that. But you can do some great things with secondary. It's not necessary.
That's
like
the
you're
thing.
saying,
These absolute statements like you don't need a secondary or
Yeah.
you should always secondary. Well, both of those things are wrong. Sometimes the secondary is good. Sometimes it's not. It depends on the beer. Depends on what you're trying to get out of it. Depends on how long it's going to take from grain to glass, all that stuff. So I don't like those statements like you don't need a secondary.
Right.
You don't have any idea what I'm doing with my beer.
Ray
How-
Daniels is not going to show up and smack you on the back of the head
Right.
for not using secondary.
You think.
Well,
Could
that's
happen,
true.
You're right, though. I think that's the main thing is with a secondary and a finished beer going in and you're going to add more to it, I think you're going to have more clarity of whatever you add to it. It's going
Yeah,
to show up
that's a
that
good
way.
point, yeah.
That you're not going to lose somewhere in the trube of the initial primary, which is something that happens, especially when you mix up and you get yeast back into the solution if you're doing whatever, moving a beer around. So, but yeah, we just said it. Secondary, if you're wanting to do it, it's going to probably give you great results. You don't have to do it, but know what you want in the first place.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right.
And so what we can take away from that is Brandon doesn't have a poop knife.
Nobody has a poop knife.
And James
the
can poop
outcast.
into a bottle.
Literally nobody ever in the history of the world has had a poop knife. I call bullshit on that entire thing.
They have had poop sticks, but not.
Just kind of shove it down.
No,
and-
for wiping your ass.
oh, yeah, and corn cobs and all that. Yeah, no.
So
But there's nobody who's had a knife hanging up to go, oh, I don't think that's going to fit down there.
That
and
was
then
that
they
was
cut it up.
that
That's
came
all.
from a Reddit thread, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
as far as I know, it
I think,
did.
and I saw it on Imgur, but it was.
Yeah.
And then of course everyone's like, "Oh, is there someone else in the world has
Yeah,
experienced
my
this?"
friend had that when I was a kid. No, they
Hashtag
didn't. You're
relatable.
a liar. All right, don't-
It's the internet.
Do we want to take a break?
Before
at
we
this
go to
point,
break,
before
let
we
me
come
talk
back,
about my challenge beer
Okay.
real quick. Let me just go
that
over
you
what I
did
did.
bring.
Well, it wasn't ready. It wasn't ready.
You're
I
definitely
tasted
challenged.
it was definitely a challenged beer. So what I got was star anise, vanilla, and cedar chips. And
Star anus.
I was not real happy about the anise part and the idea that this was supposed to be a kit. I thought, well, I'm going to make the least kittable beer you've ever had since you gave me anise. So I did a Roggen beer with anise and
There's not
vanilla.
going to be any spice in that one.
Well, my thought process behind it was that if I could really bring out the clove and the banana and kind of accentuate both of those, that the anise would be easy to blend into that. It would fit in well with those two things.
Black licorice.
And then the clove, I wouldn't have to worry too much or not clove, the vanilla. I wouldn't have to worry about the vanilla overpowering the other flavors. So what I wanted to do was something in the 5% range that was going to be real drinkable, not cloying or sweet or anything like that. And I wanted to do an acid rest so I could bring out that clove, and I wanted to do an open fermentation to keep the head pressure down and really bring out the banana esters as well. So I did a 4-step mash, the least kittable beer ever. So I did an acid rest, a saccharification at 145, a saccharification at 155, and a mash out at 168. And then I put the anise in for the last 5 minutes of the boil. I did a lot of reading on that because that's the one part of this thing I was scared about. I didn't want to make a beer that I just
You didn't want
couldn't
potpourri.
You don't want to
drink.
nuke it.
Right.
He didn't want to put it in the anise.
Right. You got to be careful
Well,
when
you
you're
might
messing with the
later.
anise.
You got to put
Yeah. When you start hovering around the star, things can go wrong.
that brown
Yeah.
star staring at
So-
you.
means two
A
things.
barking spider.
So actually, I think it was probrewer.com was where I found a couple of pro brewers who had done actual commercial beers with anise in them. And the last 5 minutes of the boil was what they said. Drop it in, and then when you're done, pull it out before the whirlpool.
I'm sorry, Stubby. I think I just snotted on your mic.
So it was a true 5-minute edition. It didn't stay in during the whirlpool or anything like that. And I think actually the flavor I got of that was exactly right. It was exactly what I wanted.
What about in the sauna?
And then I put the vanilla in during active fermentation.
In the vagina?
Or the vanilla right in the vagina, yeah.
Well,
Hey, I'd just like to point out that I'm not the one who brought that up, all right? I've been given specific instructions.
He wasn't even here, so.
Yeah,
Right.
somewhere Nigel just threw something at a wall.
So when I pitched the yeast is when I put the vanilla in, and I thought the active fermentation might kind of help get it into solution. And because a Roggen beer is a wheat beer and something I want to drink fresh, I didn't want to have to age it on this vanilla forever to get the vanilla flavor into it. So I tasted it the other day. It's not quite done fermenting. I used the WBO6 wheat beer yeast. The esters,
Yeah, it's low on that anyway.
the esters and the phenols are not real strong in it like it would be with a Weihenstephaner or something like that. But I do feel like the 4 flavors that I wanted in there are represented. They're not. None of them are overpowering, and they're pretty well balanced. I just need it to attenuate a little bit more. It's at about 1020. I'd like to get that down to 1010 if I can. And so that's where I'm at with it. So
Okay.
hopefully when I bring it in, it should be a nice beer. I do think that when I pulled the grain bill at the store, because I have to pull my own grain bills.
Oh, what a bitch.
Yeah, well,
Life sucks, huh?
yeah, well, the problem is the quality of the help you get at that, because I believe I forgot to put the chocolate malt in.
Oh.
Because when I went to lauter, I'm like, man, this is pretty light. So
By quality of help, you mean helping yourself.
right, exactly. I'm the quality of help. And
Whoever
so what I ended up doing was just throwing the chocolate malt. I already had some on hand, and I just threw it on top of the mash at the end just to get some color in. So the color is not where I would like it to be. It's not that nice deep red color.
Ruby.
So I almost feel like I need to brew this again to get it right, personally. I'm not super happy with it so far. But
So in other words, you've actually kegged it already and drank half of it, and you want another...
Better hedge my bets.
I want another free keg of this.
it's in the bucket. It's still.
Well, as long as you bring it in, man. That's the main
Once
thing.
you pull it out.
Yeah.
The anise.
Pull it out of the anise. Yeah.
All
right,
right, time for
on
a break
that note,
then,
let's
and
take
then
a
we're going
quick
to come
break.
back and get to New Main. And
Yeah.
all right,
That's the most
Yay.
great.
be right back then.
Most
Here come
graceful
the
break
many-colored
ever.
death to melt your face.
Is that who we're playing?
Always.
I don't know what he has. That's all I have at home.
So you're just gonna.
It's our house band, man.
Are you gonna stop the recording?
It's the return of the chill, it's so real. Crack a cold can, slam it back, no spill. Joe so ill, girl, she can quote that. Vocal punchline, kick it right where you dig at. Yeah, speak too much. Reppin' Southside, gotta say that once. Jackie Chan bars, watch me do them stunts. Fruity ass rappers, niggas sweet like runts. Pipe player on the beat, and that's no front. And I can back it up, cause I am him, son. Getting biz with the pad and a native tongue. If she play my horn, I'ma bang a drum. Think I didn't come correct, then you playing it dumb. Just let me do my job, then you raise your thumb. Then I gotta set the price, and you pay the sum.
I'll start
I'm a
it
jack
right
of all trades and a master of none. Then I go and get fresh, you a mess in the flesh. If you gonna say my name, please use your chest. I ain't gotta spit game, cause you know what's
Display,
best.
wow.
Street fighting with the beat, and I ain't gotta flex. Yes. Let it ride. Talk that shit.
Check, check. There you go. Now they're not on.
Bitch!
Wait.
Maybe they are. Ooh! Ooh!
Yeah, we just hung out. We did a shoddy bee. I've never done a shoddy bee. So I asked, that was one of my questions, can you do a shoddy bee? And then he said, yeah. And I was like, I've never done one, so can we do one?
The best no test, had to get it off my chest. Muscle flow like a headshot, avoiding your chest. Too fresh like press, put my feet on your desk. Young boss in the flesh, rock the mic with finesse. Pipe player on the beat, had to hit him with the flex. Pin game so crazy like a handwritten test. One chick, two breasts, third time in a dress. Bust her down real good and I'm on to the next. I'm Southside chillin', but the weather is a hot mess. What's next? Really can't guess. Run for myself, I ain't trying to impress. With your girl rolling up, eating Panda Express. Just a light bench press as I aim to progress. Talking that mess, then I have to jet. Pull the plug on the game or do I press reset? Soldiers trying too hard, at ease, cadet. No sweat, this tongue has no regrets. Just flipping these words like tape cassettes. Homegirls screw me up in the red Corvette. Popping tags, hitting bags at the mall outlet. Mic check, 1, 2, 1, 2. Get them cans in the air if you like that, bro. Hands up. Mic check, 1, 2, 1, 2. Get them cans in the air if you like that, bro. Hands up. Mic check, 1, 2, 1, 2. Get them cans in the air if you like that, bro. Hands up. Mic check, 1, 2, 1, 2. Get them cans in the air if you fuck with Joe.
On the ball, not on the heel, on the ball. That looks like 3 years. You can't do that, dude. You gotta cancel.
At this stage, when it hurts all the way up to my fucking knee,
You know the problem is, by then it's gonna feel a little better.
it's my ankle. It's just ankle shit. I don't know what the fuck happened. I was brewing and I was on that.
And stuff just happened.
Yeah, I guess this might as well happen. You know,
There was no one thing I could do. Like watching TV and all of a sudden, like I was on my feet. I brewed Friday,
Pint player on the beat, J-O-E on the creep. Flow hard like a beer with a high ABV. Army of two, just me and my brew. And never hesitant when I step to your boo. Sipping Iron Joe with the Iron Man glow. Lost in my art pen, hand Van Gogh. Me with a can as to the tango. Open up your soul and let your brain go. Southside flow at a Funktown show. Brew so good, got a nigga like whoa. Chick so hood, mugging bitches like yo. And if we ain't friends, please don't say bro. Rappers spit fast, but I'd rather rhyme slow. Cause later these days, everyone's amigo. So I'm about to switch it up, show you suckers what's up. Boom bap in my blood, blockade, battlefront. Hands up, no stick up, this a pickup. Think you dope, well, sorry, there's a mix up. Rap sucks and I say it from the gut. Everyone wanna stunt, every rapper wanna front. Just pass the blunt, middle finger to Trump. And I'm back laying low, making tracks to bump. Sugar beer, level up, IPA in my cup. Pin the rhyme, load the clip, and I'm ready to dump. I'm with the gang, no Gucci, I ain't fucking with punk. But salute, solo Lucci, yeah, we live from the phone. Southside, get the money like Scrooge McDuck. All my niggas street sharks, and they ready to buck. Make your girl moisten up when I'm deep in them guts. Then bust a move like Omarion, dancing in touch. Chug like Brew crew, you ain't fucking with us. And just like that, another one bites the dust.
As the years have gone by, the guys on Highway and them that
1 minute. 1 minute remaining.
Probably.
You always need more beers.
We do need more beers. There's not enough here. There's a sacrilegious beer over there.
Sacrilegious.
Yeah.
I'll send it to you.
Oh, sacrilegious.
It's been in there long enough. What? Oh yeah. Eventually you're gonna have to run that bitch.
Not I, said the pig.
Next year.
I'm not president next year.
You're VP this year, aren't you?
It's still voluntary, you know, right? Like,
Come on, Brandon.
What do voluntary mean?
Well, welcome back to Come and
Welcome
Brew It Radio. We're back
to Come
again.
and Brew It Radio. We're back again.
Deja vu.
Are you gonna do the rest of the show in the the voice?
You guys
No.
just
All
echo,
sarcastic?
echo each other the whole rest of the show.
Welcome back to
We've
Come
done
and
that
Brew It
before. It doesn't work
Radio.
that well.
We're really glad to have you back.
I thought you were getting ready to start singing "Welcome Back, Carter" or something, man.
You mean Cotter back?
Carter or whatever.
Before we
Looking
get
good,
started,
Mr. Cotter.
Before we get started, we have a coupon code for everybody. It's a one-time use, 10% off of Jared's Ginger Saison Kit using J-Royd Ginger. One word.
You might want to spell that.
J-Royd?
J-R-O-I-D-G-I-N-G-E-R. J-Royd
J-Royd.
Ginger. It's a really good kit. It's a summer beer that we have come out every year, and it uses the ginger candy syrup
yeah.
from Cascade Candy Beer Company, and it's really good. A lot of
It's
people love
difficult to convey how good this beer is, actually.
it's
Every time
really
I've had
good.
it up here, I've really, really enjoyed it. And it's a perfect summer beer. It's not real high alcohol. It's real refreshing. It's easy to brew.
Just a
And-
hint of ginger, not like over
Just
the
a
top.
hint of ginger.
There's no dry hopping with a bag of dicks whatsoever. So we're good with that one.
I'm glad you specified.
Everybody who knows the old J-Royd episodes.
I mean, you can if you want to.
Also,
he may be in too for the next one. That
I
may
hope
be-
so. We want to get him back in.
Yeah, it's
that
been
may-
too long.
I know.
That may be
Miss
too
J-Royd.
much.
Also,
Him and Turning Point? That's true.
oh wow, yeah.
Well,
no, that's
I-
not a good night for that.
To be fair, I should say him and Turning Point because my
No, the
history with
worst
Turning
was-
Point has not been good.
No, he and Pete were the worst.
Oh,
They would
him
just
with
be over
Fritz
there like,
too.
yeah. Oh man. But anyhow,
We also have the every show we do the prize giveaway now, and the keyword if you guys out on Patreon, patrons, we have a keyword, and tonight's prize is a $20 gift certificate that we can apply to your online account. What is the keyword tonight, Brandon?
Razzle dazzle. Woohoo! Did I do the jazz?
I only
hands?
see one jazz hand, but yeah.
It's the
Oh, it's
artistic
shaking.
angle. That's what it is.
Sorry.
Actually, that's not even a jazz hand. That's just his normal shakes.
He's just waving hi to the viewers.
that's what happens when
Yeah.
he goes into DTs.
So yeah, go out to the post on Patreon, and the first person to put Razzle Dazzle down is going to win a $20 gift certificate.
We'll
tonight.
also
That'll be
accept Rizzle My Dizzle.
Rizzle my dizzle.
Rizzle My Dizzle will also be acceptable. So tell people what that means, and if they're not eligible for it, what they can do to be eligible for that.
You can
because we're
be
giving
one of our-
prizes away all the time. now.
Yes, every show we're giving prizes away. All we need is to be a Patreon patron, and you'll check out the Patreon website for all patrons. It shows up as one of the posts, and you'll follow that out there, and just
Yeah, and also
all you
we-
need to do is reply that you heard it.
That sounds
during
really
the show.
expensive, Greg.
Very expensive. Not really.
No. It's as much as
What if I just wanted to contribute a little bit? Will that still help the show?
You can. $2, $5, $10, and $20.
Yeah, just even $2, like buying us a half a beer, man, or a sample.
The good thing
tasting.
about it is that the more you do, the more that we give back to you. So you can have shirts, you can have one-on-one contact, tutorials, and whatnot. And then when you get up to the $20 level, we'll actually do a brew day with you. We'll work on a beer together, and then hopefully we can bring that on the show. Maybe we can make a kit out of it.
Will you autograph a shirt and send it overseas?
Yes.
You know what? Actually, I think we might autograph a shirt and send Stubby overseas to deliver it to you in person.
Yeah, there's a plan.
There's
Yeah,
that.
That is
So-
a good plan.
Well,
Stubby will show up on your doorstep and say razzle dazzle with jazz hands and everything.
That's at the $50 level.
Yes.
it's got to be more than that. but I will be in Germany. We can meet halfway, maybe.
There you
So,
go.
I don't know. But we'll see.
But yeah, we're always trying to give back, and that's the main thing about
Once
this.
the
is like
razzling and the dazzling.
$20 goes a long way, and for anything that you're doing, I mean, patrons,
Yeah,
it's
and-
just like you got a grain bill or you got a kit coming out of
Right,
that,
and we've got some really cool stuff coming out for that too. We're also going to do some member only content, so you'll get to see some video and some other outtakes and stuff that only Patreon members can get.
Yes,
so,
only through Patreon.
and we've got a few of those for you present patrons.
We only
Or
really
coming up.
put out the shitty part of the show for everybody else. The good stuff,
It's
we
on.
cut it all out, and that's the behind the scenes that you're going to want to see. So
Yeah, like pulling
That's
it
the
out of the
B-roll that's
anus
at the Christmas
is
party.
Nothing.
Whip it out.
You might actually see the actual process.
Anyway, so
see how the sausage is made.
So moving on, as we said earlier, we have David Clark in from Main Brewing.
Hello.
Starting in right now. David, do you want to go ahead and start telling us a little bit about Main Brewing before we get talking about anything else?
Sure. Main Brewing is the brewery that my wife and I own in Pantego, Texas, a small town inside of Arlington on the west side. We got our start pretty much exactly where all of you guys are, home brewing. My wife bought me a kit in 2012, and we made our first batch of Horrible Amber Ale. That wasn't what it was named. It was actually a football
I was
reference.
going to say
but-
that's not a very good name.
No, but it was very descriptive. We drank every last drop, and we just kind of fell in love with it. We started getting mixed 6-packs of the same style from different breweries and picking up on things that we liked. And I went down a rabbit hole on different online forums, on recipe creation, on reading basically anything I could about craft beer, and I really fell in love with it. And so I decided to start keeping track of some of that stuff, aside from just journals and brewing notes and things like that, on a blog. And I created the Main blog, and basically just different brewing sessions that I had, trying different things with my recipes, going to beer festivals. And about a year in, I decided, it would be really cool to kind of transition this into maybe beer journalism. And I started interviewing some other brewers. And that's where I met Wade and Sean with Division, and Greg and Kurt at Legal Draft, Shannon, 903. I started talking to some of these brewers, and I would ask them kind of similar questions that you usually read on a brewer's profile. Like, how'd you get started? What was the biggest roadblock? What are your signature styles? And it kind of, I settled into a groove, but I was also realizing as I was writing all of these interviews up, the beginning of their story sounds an awful lot like where I am right now. And I just knew if I didn't at least look into it, I would regret not at least trying. And the more I did, the more I realized that this is something that I was very passionate about, that I had a lot of energy to do. I'm still relatively young, so if something terrible happens, I probably may not end up a hobo. But
all bets are off, man. That's the way it worked for all of us.
yeah, it's it just came to a point where I was like, I can sit behind a desk and be boring and have terrible stories, or I can be a part of this big thing that's happening in America and at least do something in my local community instead of my day job, and actually create memories for folks and connect with everyone. And that's been the most rewarding thing about this, is we've heavily involved the community the entire time we've been doing it. Through the blog, I decided to transition the blog from my home brewing into how to build a brewery. I actually started calling it Building a Brewery with every post, and I posted every week, every other week, as often as I could, just to kind of show folks, you go to a brewery tour, and they teach you how beer is made. Well, they very rarely teach you how a brewery is made, and I wanted to kind of give a live account of that over the last several years, and we have, and it's warts and all. There have been, roadblocks, there have been just huge letdowns, but at the same time, there's a phrase that we latched onto really early is, you've got a dream in your mind, allow it to change shape, but never lose the dream. So we wanted to start 2.5 years ago as a production brewery. It was kind of the end of that time in the market, and it was going to be an uphill climb. But then the more time we spent searching for financing, for a location, for basically just feeling out what New Main was going to be, it became more and more obvious that it really needed to be a smaller endeavor, a more local, more neighborhood type brewery, a place people felt comfortable coming to, spending time at, and not necessarily showing up on every single tap wall and every single shelf. And the relationships that we made in the community when we realized that it needed to be much more focused have been just irreplaceable. I mean, electricians, other home brewers, handymen, plumbers, just all these people kind of came together because they believed in the neighborhood brewery. And so the time that we've spent getting this place open and the time that everyone's kind of invested in our story has come back now because they can read, you can go right now to my New Main blog and read about the third batch of beer I ever brewed, all the way to I've opened a tap house now that's about to be brewing its own beer. So it was very much about sharing the story and involving everyone with it and kind of making our mark on the craft beer scene by just contributing and opening it up.
Well, I think that ties in, too, to what we were talking about earlier in terms of understanding exactly what it is that drives the craft brew movement, what it is that makes it as successful as it is, and how difficult it is to try and artificially duplicate that. And a blog like you're talking about, or something that gives somebody the ability to read and track the reasons you got into it, the process, the obstacles, and where you end up, really plays into giving them a feel for exactly who they're buying the beer from and what the beer means, what it means to have that in your glass and holding it. It's not just beer sitting in your glass. It's a person. It's an idea. It's a dream. It's something that you really love, and that's why AB InBev has struggled trying to duplicate that, because that is meaningful to people, especially in a small format like you're talking about, a neighborhood brewery, something where you're placing your success on a small neighboring community to come in and support you. And that's been the recipe for success for a lot of these breweries.
Sure. And, it's as much a reflection of the community as beer styles when they originally came up. Pils in Germany just happened to have a certain kind of water that was really good for that style of ale, and same thing with Köln, and same thing with all these different things. The region was in your glass. That's literally the identity of each of these towns. It's very much the same way now with craft beer. Any craft brewery that's opening that has a tap room, the region, the neighborhood is in your glass. It's the water that you brew with. It's, hey, you know what? We really like this one style of beer. Let's do something crazy with it, or let's brew it. It's the one-offs. It's the small batch stuff that really allows you to connect with people.
So what's your philosophy behind the beers you brew in terms of which beers you brew and how you craft those recipes to fit the idea you're talking about?
Through the whole process of making the brewery smaller and connecting with people, we realized that there's still a lot of beer knowledge that needs to be put out there. There's still a lot of folks that think there's a difference between beer and craft beer. Beer is beer.
Right, they just don't know beer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So our main focus, people always ask us, what's your main styles? What are you going to focus on? Our style is education. So we're going to brew, we have 5 recipes that we've worked on. Some of them we've won competitions with, but there are 5 recipes brewed to style BJCP guidelines. So you know what you're getting. You can look up what the flavor notes are. You can look up what you should be tasting. We've got our wit beer, pale ale, our IPA, porter, and our stout. And then we present those to you as the main beers. And then our goal is to have different treatments, new treatments of each individual beer. So ultimately, when we finally get all of our beer on our wall, all the different treatments up there, we want to have a flavor flight. We want you to be able to taste the main beer and then a fruited version, a spiced version, and a wood or barrel-aged version. so you can see what different ingredients, different processes, different tastes do to the same exact beer.
How they change your beer every time, and like based off that one style that is close as possible to what it's supposed to be, but still possibly with your spin.
Sure, yeah, and you know, we're partial to the recipes that we've come up with, and they're not at all. We're not saying this is what this beer should taste like. This is you're going to look up a style guideline and read, okay, porter, chocolate with coffee notes. It's a nice dry finish, not terribly heavy. That's what you expect in your glass. That's your main beer, and then we're going to have a version of it with hatch chilies that really bring out kind of the roast character. We'll have a version that's aged on white oak, and it really brings out the roast and a little bit of the dryness that comes with oak flavoring, also with
I see the education in this, and that's really the key thing that I think. I do see a lot of breweries opening up right now that they are educating, but what they're putting out necessarily is not directed to where the people who are coming through their doors know that they're educating as far as that goes. It's one of those things where it's like you don't know necessarily that what you're coming in is starting off with this base style and those things, but like the concept of, you know, really throwing some things out there off of the same beer every time versus, you know, a lot of other places like we're making this is our general style area and we're doing that. I think you have something with that. I mean, I would hope, because being educational is only going to help. You know, it's like people can come to you for that. So.
Exactly, and we want it to be a rewarding process for someone too, because we're thankfully now in a pretty decent place in craft beer history in America that you don't have craft beer associated with craft beer snobs. That's kind of gone by the wayside, and thankfully craft beer fans have killed the craft beer snob.
You're right.
But there's still room for education. There's still, I mean,
I'm a craft
schools
beer
exist.
Well, I mean, you have the whole audience of the core audience is still pretty much slaves to AB InBev and the others, that they have no idea that there's more than just a light 4.5% golden liquid that's extra fizzy and needs to be served at 20 degrees.
Right.
You know,
but if that's your flavor, at least try the other things. That, you know, why do you go to a buffet and only try one thing?
Right.
There's all kinds of beers out there. Figure out, you may not even know that barnyard saisons are like your thing unless you try them.
Exactly.
And then one day it's like, oh my God, this is beautiful. You don't know that if you think that beer and craft beer are different. And that's nonsense. It's marketing is all that is.
Well, I think the same thing is the best part about that is the fact that you're presenting a concept and you're not throwing a whole lot of different versions of the same basic concept to them with the other alternate versions of those things. Because, I mean, I've been to a lot of breweries. I have 4 porter options. They don't really say much about them. They're not saying that it's the same porter 4 different times. Just 4 porter options, and what do I think of that? You know, that kind of thing.
Sure.
And then 1 brown ale and a couple of pale ales or something. It's like, what's really going on here? What am I looking for that's a variance between these things if I'm a new craft beer person? So
Right. Am I tasting the Yenny or the Laurel?
Oh, Jesus. Right. That's it. I'm leaving. No, but what I like is that it gives you a baseline, so you can choose something that you're comfortable with, whether it's a wit beer or an IPA or a pale ale or whatever, and then work from there. And
expand.
The average person doesn't really know what they're tasting. They know they like something, they don't like it, but now I can try it with this different edition or in this different edition and this and realize it kind of helps you pick out the components of the flavor you like without being trained how to taste.
Exactly. You can be as hands-on or as hands-off with craft beer just in general.
Right.
But giving someone the framework to look at a style and then, you know, the fruited version, oh, well, yeah, that really accentuates this kind of yeast. The citrus is really coming out, and especially with this lime peel or something in there, they hone in on what they like and what they're looking for in other beers. It only serves to make beer more accessible to someone who thinks, you know, they look at a shelf and they see 600 different beers.
And they're intimidated by it. They don't know where to start and any of that kind of thing.
Exactly.
And,
it's like
if you take somebody to a craft beer place that you're into craft beer and they're not, they maybe they like IPAs or maybe or something, or a pale ale or something like that, where you can go in there and show them, okay, well, if you like this beer, try it like this, try it like that, and it's something more approachable. And if they don't like that, they can go back to the thing they
alternatives.
like.
Exactly.
And you still have a whole playground of stuff.
Yeah, see, I've seen that when a lot of times I've been anywhere with people and thought, you guys have so much great stuff in that menu right now, and I want to try all of it. It sounds great to me because I understand what all of what's going on here. But what's your specialty? What's your real deal? And I might see some things where, you know, you look through the menu list and you see that they do 4 or 5 things that's probably based off of the same base beer, more or less. And that's usually what I direct the people with me to and say, try this because people obviously like this.
Yeah.
This is the thing that they like the best from a brewery, you know. So I mean, just you got to
I
work
always just
on
go
that.
into breweries and I go, what doesn't suck? I'm just kidding.
That's a foolproof method right there, because then you know you're not getting bad beer.
They're like, crap, we didn't think anybody was going to ask us that.
Shit.
I
All
guess
right, we'll be back from the store in a minute.
nothing doesn't suck. All of it sucks. Yeah. You foiled our plan.
Dang it.
But yeah, I think that's the main thing is like when you walk in, there are so many people that don't have the education. So you walk in with other people and you say, hey, what are you in the mood for? Look what's on the menu. Oh, man, I see. What's that? Oh, well, they have 3 Saisons. They have, which I love the variety. So I'm not complaining about that. It's like they have 3 Saisons. They have a couple of different Imperial Stouts. They have a few IPAs. They have some Northeast IPAs. They have some, what is that, a bourbon barrel something or other. You know, they just a variety of things. What's a
West
grisette?
Texas, New
What's
England IPA.
What's a grisette? What does that mean? You know, those kind of things. Like, well, I'm not going to start you there. I'm going to tell you that much. But it's, what do you want out of these things that are there? And then what's that blonde ale with peaches?
Something that's
you know,
high alcohol.
Well, you
Hear
know,
that all
it's
the time.
difficult to give somebody who's not a craft beer drinker, or even somebody who is a craft beer drinker but doesn't really know how to deconstruct taste and really know what they're tasting.
Right.
It's difficult to give them a beer and say, okay, now do you taste this Saison? Do you get the pear flavors in the esters, and do you get that light bready note and kind of a sweet malt flavor? No, they don't get that at all. But you can give them a Saison and they do like it.
Yes.
Okay, well now
They
here's
like
the
the
Saison
base.
with orange peel in it. Do you see how the orange brings out these other flavors in there?
Exactly.
Yes,
Here's
well,
one
that's
with
a
a
lot
little bit of-
easier for them to process.
or dark malt that suddenly
Yeah.
makes it more of a darker Saison. It's the same basic recipe.
Right,
you
like
know.
a stout.
Yeah.
And now it's got oak in it. Well, you see how that brings out the vanilla flavor.
Yes.
Or a stout or a porter with vanilla. You see how that brings out the chocolate flavor or something like that.
Exactly.
It's easy for you to take the one and then add one thing to it and say, you see how this brings out these other flavors, how it accentuates this and kind of downplays that. It's much it's a more approachable thing.
And then
for-
you can
Exactly.
take that to some people and throw all of that shit out the door. Just for example, like my uncle came in, and he's probably 80-something now, and he's never liked beer. He hates beer. And he came in, and he's like, well, let me try some of your homebrew. So he went over to the kegerator and poured a Roush beer. And he goes, oh my God, I didn't know beer could taste like this. This is the most amazing thing
Yes.
I've ever tasted in my life. Oh my God, I want to make beer if I can make beer like this.
Yeah, it took
And-
you 80 years
and
to
then you
get to
tell
this
them,
point. You know?
you can't make beer like that.
And you smacked it out of his hand. Get out!
But
you
I
can
mean,
try, but it'll never happen.
But that's not a style that a lot of people like. I mean, that is a really niche style.
You're correct.
And-
It was
and
the
I
only
mean,
one he can taste at this point.
But he likes to drink whiskey, so I don't know if there's any correlation
Probably.
there. But
yeah. I
Well,
guarantee
smoke
you,
is a very relatable flavor. It's in barbecue. It's in scotch.
Right,
it's in a lot
right.
of different things. It's so I can see how that would be something that would resonate with some people that may not necessarily be.
Well, it'd be
craft beer
even the
drinkers.
backward characteristic of some of these things, like smoke, not as much, but like I said, if you had someone say, "I want that one that has fruit in it," okay, well then if you like that, then you like what the base beer was.
Right.
Now
Yeah.
come back to the base beer. Now
And you
try
start
it
getting things out of it.
with dry hopping instead of fruit. And this is the whole flavor flight thing that we're
Right.
talking about here. So it's like, now try it with something else with that you added to it. Maybe you added wood into it or something. You changed it with a perception of the character with that minor, just one minor detail. So,
And
we
that,
actually,
and that came from homebrewing. It came from trying the recipe and like, I wonder what this would taste like with hatch chilies in it, or I wonder what this would taste like with lavender. Yes. And then once we realized that these are the things that were making us fall even more in love with craft beer, like, why is no one, or why are so few people doing that? We're not coming up with, we're not inventing the wheel here. It's happened before, and we took a lot of kind of inspiration from some West Coast breweries that have one beer that is horizontally different and vertically different. So they do like a yearly version of that beer that's the base. Then they do it on a wood aging, barrel aging. They have a strong version. They have kind of a session. It's it's just giving people the framework and
right.
And it's making it, I don't want to say digestible, but making it something that your average person is like, oh, well, that's not as
accessible is more
accessible.
it's accessible.
That's
yeah.
it.
That's because, I mean, honestly, when you bring people in and they don't know what they want, you can't confront them with a board of 22 beers of just like a crap person would be like, hell yeah, but
Right.
for them, they don't
crap
know.
person?
And a craft beer person.
Oh, I
that
thought you
just
said a
knows
crap person.
crap person.
With a
A
real
crap
big
person's
knife.
like, I hate everything, and I got a crap knife here. I'm going to cut it all in half.
Where's your restroom?
Crap knife.
I'll be in there cutting turds up. But you don't want the, it's like I always think, like I take family into places all the time, and they're like, well, what do we want? And I know that
A poop knife.
I know that I'm not going to force
Nobody
something
wants a
that
poop
I
knife.
like that's
Sure,
like exceptional or way outside the boundaries. I'm not going to push that on them at all. It's like
Exactly.
I want them to have what they're going to enjoy. So
And-
I look
and
at the
that's-
board, and then I know that if you try this, you're also going to like this because it's the base version of the same. But like you like it now because this has strawberries in it.
Yeah.
Well,
It-
I used to do craft beer tastings a long time ago, and I really helped Rara a lot when they were getting started, and one of the things that I found interesting was that was really at the precipice of the craft beer industry here in Texas, and I mean, man, hell, that was just them and Franconia, I think, at the time, and then maybe St. Arnold's, and
Right.
when I was at Tech, they had the first. It's still there, one of the first brew pubs in the state of Texas, and one of the things that I found really interesting was that what people would like and what people wouldn't like.
yeah.
There was some people that you would immediately come in and you go. Now, one of the things that we found that people that were hard liquor drinkers were or they like gin and tonics or whiskey and stuff like that. They were more apt to like an IPA, which
Right.
you never think that you could just hand somebody an IPA right out of the box and go, hey, try this.
I've been saying for a while now, I think that gin is the IPA of the spirits world
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, maybe.
I agree with that.
because
I've
it's
never
got
heard you
the
say that.
botanical. I said it right before I gave you that apparently coma-inducing dose of gin.
Oh, the
at
one I went to sleep on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just kidding.
Worried about me. Shit. Sorry, that's an inside reference there.
But anyhow, no, it's really funny, but how people react to craft. And one of the things that was interesting too was when I would bring when I would go to the tailgates and stuff. Fritz would go, oh, you're going up to Lubbock? Hey, we'll take a keg of, buy a keg of Ugly Pug, or I'll give you some cash or something, whatever. Anyway, without getting in trouble.
You
try
get
to
the
do it
pug.
legit.
You travel with some pug.
Yeah, travel with some pug. So anyway, and it was real funny because you'd have people back then. It was like, ooh, I don't drink that craft beer shit.
Right.
Black.
It was
What
a
is
badge,
this?
dark.
It was a badge of honor. It's like, oh, I don't do that.
Yeah, I'm not drinking that. But it was weird though because I would come up with my homebrew and it'd be gone in 30, 45 minutes. But they had a more open mind to drink some crap that I made than they would a commercial
It's
brewery.
all the same damn thing.
Yeah, so
beer.
Yeah, so
Beer's beer.
it's really strange how
It's been around for a long damn time.
people. But they were more open to try that than they were like a craft beer brewery, you know, which I found really interesting, and I think it's just. And I don't know if it's kind of that West Texas mentality where you know, it's kind of like you're making your own shine.
I don't think
whatever,
that's West Texas. I think that's just generally
how people
approaching the non-craft beer drinker.
The
with
marketed
craft beer.
people.
And
The
we did it
marketed
to
people.
ourselves.
Yeah,
We did it to ourselves with the way we act and the way we talk about beer and behave.
The post-prohibition
True,
bullshit.
but you should never apologize for something you're passionate about.
No, you're right, but we make ourselves seem like snobs a lot of times. And that kind of goes back to what we were talking about with the AB InBev thing. Is I hate the argument where people are like, all they make is piss beer and all that. Well, I don't think that's true at all, and I don't like to badmouth Budweiser
They make some pretty
or
good
Bud
piss
Light
beer.
or Coors Light, or I have PBR in my fridge right now. You know,
that's
Well, think of it this way:
You know,
it's the
that's brewed by Miller.
post-prohibition. It's
I know, but it
post-prohibition marketing
tastes better.
bullshit that is the only reason. Because if that wasn't the dominant factor, then people would know about beer. There would not be a craft beer anything. It would just be beer.
Right,
And there would be
right.
a lot
No,
of
you're
different kinds of
100%
beer,
right
just
about
like
that.
the rest of the world. You know,
Right.
except for the mega conglomerate corporation.
Here's what I
whatever,
found
you know,
interesting,
so-
though, is where craft beer is going now. And I know we're going down a rabbit hole the last 15 minutes, but is looking at all the craft breweries that are making Pilsners now.
Yep.
and doing a good job too.
Yeah.
But and it's one of my favorite styles. But
Our own Jared at Wild Acre makes a very
Yes,
solid.
he does, and I just
Roy.
bought a half barrel of it.
I love that beer.
But I find it interesting that that's where the industry's going towards, kind of more of a German traditional style beer, which is far from an IPA. But
Well, you know, I think that we're getting away from our own stereotypes and our own weird attitude about beer, where it's got to be this or it's got to be that. I think people are just more open-minded about it and realizing that this is a great style of beer, but we're not going to get it from the source in the condition it's supposed to be in.
yeah,
And so hopefully,
And you shouldn't have to have it from the source.
hopefully, the next thing that'll start showing up are English bitters.
yeah, right.
Keep dreaming, but
Well-
if that ever happens, I will be there.
Hey, I have a dream. I have a dream.
Well, and I
yeah.
think even still, out of all that, is that when it is here, even all of those, you're going to find variations on them that
Yeah.
include
Yeah.
other things that are not Reinheitsgebot type of ingredients. You know what I'm saying? It's like not the typical.
And you know
you're
what?
gonna
I
find
think that's
things that
great.
they totally change it. That's just, I mean, a Schwarzbier was probably around more likely before a Pilsner. I don't know on the history of that one. It seems like it could be, but I still get the idea that a Pilsner could have the dark roast added to it, as well as it could have something else added to it that makes an improvement. I'm pretty sure I've had some Pilsners with fruit added that work out pretty damn well.
I was thinking
so-
about that earlier today, actually.
See, and that's what I would
Pilsner
like to see
specific.
more of, is less of an attitude of what you should and shouldn't do.
Why
I
is
say
there a
this,
boundary?
And I say this being 3 hours removed from giving James Harrington a bunch of shit about putting glitter in his beer. So
Well,
as
glitter's
much of a
a-
hypocrite as everybody else.
In his
but-
beer
visual
or his
additive.
beard?
well, I guess it's both.
Yeah.
He probably put it in his beard.
I
At
told
some
him that
point.
his glitter beer should have been named Glitter in the Shitter, and he said, "You're right."
That's amazing.
So you're gonna go check your poop later?
No, I didn't drink any glitter beer. I have standards. You see what I just did?
Yeah,
you see what I
did
just
see
did?
that.
You have double standards.
I have double standards. That's exactly right. That's better
Brandon
than
has
single
triple
standards,
standards.
That's right.
The
That's-
more standards, the better.
It's one
All right?
more. Yeah.
But anyway, let's get back to the topic that we had on hand.
Yeah. So when
and-
we're talking about flavor flats and what you're talking about, and taking a beer and making variations of it, a key component of that is keeping records of what you're doing,
Exactly.
because you're not going to get it right the first
Yeah,
time.
it all works
Right.
together.
It's all going to be an experimental thing, and especially if you're taking one batch of beer and splitting it into four and doing four different things with it, you're not going to remember what all you did to
Exactly.
the extent that you need to go back and make adjustments to get it closer to what you want it to be based on your experiments. So this is an area where I'm terrible.
Yeah, I was
And
going to say,
most
then
people
why
are.
do I keep trying to do that?
Most people are terrible. This is literally the least expensive thing you can do to make your brewing better. All it takes
That's a very
is-
good point.
Because you can buy a pump, and that makes brew day so much easier, and you can buy fermentation control, and that makes your beers more consistent. But the thing that you can spend $0 on and immediately see an improvement the next time you brew is just write it down. If it's something
Paper's not free, David.
hey, then draw a line in the dirt.
Okay.
No, but, I mean it's something that it takes a little bit more time, and it may even be like I don't even know what I'm writing down. Doesn't matter. Just start get in the habit of
You know what? It
today is
doesn't
the
take any
performance
more
of this
time,
brew.
though, is the thing. It
Exactly.
doesn't.
You're sitting around drinking a beer anyway. You might as
Yeah.
well just take one less sip and write down. Oh, my mash temperature was a little bit lower than
You've
last
never
time.
been to one of my brew days.
But it exactly what you said though. Splitting a batch and then taking notes on it. That's really where this thing, taking notes and keeping records of your beers, really allows you to get a better understanding both of what your recipe does, what each ingredient does, and then what each of those treatments brings out of the flavor. Things that you didn't even know you wanted to taste in your beer. You can really get a good sense of. I did one batch of our IPA with 6 different woods at one point, and we had basically everything you guys had on those little honeycombs and chips and everything. I was like, all right, let's see what sticks. And I found 3 that I really enjoyed, and they were very different beers. We put our wit beer on rosewood with cherry, and it was phenomenal. And because I have notes, I could probably get close to that again. But if you don't take notes, you don't know if it's the cherry or the specific
It was
type
definitely
of oak.
putting the wood in the cherry. Yeah.
Yeah.
and even on a more basic note, and I say I'm bad about doing this. I'm not really bad about doing this. I was good about doing it to a point where I use those notes to develop consistent practices that now I don't need to make notes on certain things. Where I know if I'm doing a thing, I've worked out that process that I do it that same way every time. But the only way I came about doing that was by making notes and keeping track of how I was doing it.
You do your thing on your thing.
Do the thing on the thing. You get ready to get ready,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then you do the thing on the thing, and then
That's a really good point that you
Right.
brought up too, because like you don't have to print out the brewer's sheets that you can find online.
Right.
You don't have to check every single box every single
No,
time.
you're right.
It helps to be that consistent, and that there's no harm in it. But for example, I'm going to hold up a sheet of my latest brew day of my pale ale. It's like 6 lines, and it's got beer stains all over it. It's got pencils. It's got incorrect math that I scratched out and was embarrassed by. It came down to this is what I did differently, or this is what I'm trying to make sure sticks out. This is what I knew I had to do with this water.
Secret.
It's just a well, and this is also this was a beer I brewed for my buddy's wedding actually next week.
Secret.
Yeah, so there you go. There's the malt bill. Nope, just kidding. Oh, there we go. So it doesn't even have to be super detailed or anything. Just write down, okay, I did my Camden tablet. The strike was a little hotter than I expected, so I balanced it back with a little bit of other water. My extraction wasn't quite what I expected, so I had to balance out and adjust boil time. Just write it down, because by the end of brew day, you're tired, you cleaned all your stuff, you packaged some beer, you probably drank some beer. You're not going to remember it.
The
Just
part
write
about
it
probably
down.
drank some beer is really what really can ruin record keeping.
Yes,
So-
I made it a habit that I don't start drinking until the boil starts, because all the stuff that I
That's a good
usually,
rule.
all the
I've
stuff
made
that
it
I'm,
a habit of only counting the beer that I drank from the boil on.
in dog beers, I've only had one.
That's right. That's right. This is especially important for people that don't get to brew on a regular basis,
right.
or people that are figuring out how they want their system to be. Or, like I've had the same system, the same configuration for a long time. I generally brew once or twice a month. It's the same thing over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
So there are certain things I don't need to keep notes on. There are other things that I do need to keep notes on. But if you only get to brew every couple of months, and maybe you've just moved to all grain brewing, you should write down all the little things you're talking about there.
Everything.
Your strike temp and how far off you were, and your efficiency and all that kind of thing. And you need to, what you're doing is creating data.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then later on, you need to be
A
able
trail
to
of data
take
as
that
well.
data and turn it into something meaningful.
Right.
And so, one of the trickier parts about all grain brewing, especially if you're in like a cooler system, which a lot of people are using, which are great systems. You brew great beer in a cooler, but there's some idiosyncrasies to it. One of the hardest things is your strike temp and hitting your mash temp, and
Really
Every
dialing
single
that
time,
keeping notes is crucial to that.
Maybe that's what I've been doing wrong.
Yeah.
I've been drinking until the boil.
No, I think that's right. I think
Drink until the boil, and you stop drinking.
well, Papazian always says, "Relax, don't worry, have a homebrew."
Right.
That's the 1st
I'm
thing
pretty
I
fucking
do.
relaxed.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, you're like, it's like, I relaxed early on when I was making the recipe, and then when I went and got the recipe, and then when the day started, I relaxed a lot, and then thought, oh, I better start the day. So,
Yeah, that's what they do. In
It's like golf. The only reason I got into this in the first place is because I realized you could drink while you do it.
Yeah.
yeah.
Hashtag sports.
That's why I bowl, dude.
Yeah. But I mean, okay, so you guys run a homebrew shop. How often has someone come in and it's like, man, this beer really didn't turn out like I was expecting it to? And it's like, okay, well, what did you do? Well, I don't know.
Oh, man.
Because you can't pick apart your process and fix the thing that's wrong or needs to get
There's
better
a lot of
if
I
you
don't
don't know
know.
what that process
Yeah.
is.
You can even go to something basic like, do you know what your original gravity was?
Right.
Oh, yeah, we have a lot of
A
that.
lot of
Oh
that.
my God.
We always
Yeah.
say, you
It's
have
a number.
to measure that. You have to measure
You
that.
have to know it, yeah.
Oh, I was going to say none of my customers ever screw up anything. They're fantastic.
That's true.
We're going to
know
leave
great
Stubby
beer.
with that one. And then, you may now move about the cabin. Yeah, that's the
I
main
sure hope
thing.
that
It's like
sound comes through because there's a lot of that shit that doesn't
think
make
that
any
does,
sense
yeah.
in the last few episodes.
I think that you will find that is a main thing that we find a lot of people say. Okay, you have to record
What, you're free to move
at
about
least
the cabin?
no, you at
Yes.
least have to record what your gravity was because we can't help you if we
Right.
don't know what started and you tell me
Right.
that it tastes like this and what's going on. It's like, well, where did it start? What was the gravity? What did you use in the first place? Like, I got to know the gravity to know how the yeast might react to it.
And
Do
you
you
know,
really
it's not just us either. This is one of the things I'm seeing online that you didn't used to see for years. But like on Reddit, for example, people will put questions out there. The very first response people will get is, "We need to know more information about what
Right.
you did. We need to know
Yeah.
your process and your gravities and all that stuff."
How'd
People-
you do it?
It used to be people
What
would
did it
throw out
result
10
in?
answers, and then someone would say, "Hey, what about this?" Now you'll see where people won't give any answers at all.
I made a
until
pale
you
ale and
beat-
it sucked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, I
Darn.
did this and this, and there was a problem. And people will say, before anybody can answer your question, we need to know this, this, and this.
Right.
And
Because
if you
there's
didn't write it down,
multiple factors. I mean, one simple thing that doesn't taste right in your beer could be mash, could be ingredients, could be bad fermentation, could be bad sanitation. It could be a million different things. If you don't have a baseline,
Right.
And you hit on it earlier too. It's just developing these things. These may become habits or just things you do every brew day. You may not need to write it down eventually,
eventually,
but
right.
just write it down. Just get you a sheet of paper, a moleskin notebook. Doesn't matter. Just write it down. If you're
you
doing
use
something,
Beersmith, put it in Beersmith.
exactly.
I mean,
Beersmith is perfect for that.
just write it in the notes.
There's notes all over the
the
place.
only way you get to the point
Write
where
it
you
down,
don't
eh?
need to write the things down is by writing down enough times where you know
Yeah,
right.
I
exactly.
do this way every time, and I get this result out of it. Well, now I can take that off the table. That's not a factor now.
Sure.
You know.
That You're not missing any of the details that need to be there.
Yeah.
Because I think, that's totally the place that all goes is that you have to find where they start. Because I think we have a lot of beginners that don't understand the fact that you need the details because you're getting lost in them.
Hell, even advanced people.
Yeah,
for that
especially
matter.
that. I just remember starting
Hell,
off.
when's the last time you took a gravity? I don't ever take them.
What?
I will say that out of this room, we probably had the best note taker as the person that's our guest tonight. But like when I write stuff down, I write it down. I print off a Beersmith sheet, and I write a lot of details down on like my final runnings, my pre-boil gravity, my original gravity, and then I go back to the same sheet. I keep a pile that should actually be in a notebook.
Yeah.
And I'll find that sheet and I write it down so that I know for the next time that I do it, if there's anything different about it. It may be just one sheet of paper.
I guess I'm better than I thought I was.
That's just me.
Yeah, because I guess I do about the same amount.
And I will go into Beersmith and actually type it in, but it just depends on the recipe and how much I want to modify.
I always
it,
type it into Beersmith.
Yeah,
so I
Tanner
can be
Marshall was
disappointed with
saying
my efficiency.
on here on Facebook that he does that on the Grainfather app. There's a place where you can do that.
It's so fast and easy.
Wow.
If you have the access, just do it really quickly, but make sure that you do it. Make sure that you take that measurement and do it.
And
when
I
you
think
take an original gravity, make sure that you do the one with the if you're
write
all
it
grain,
down.
refractometer, and a hydrometer.
To
with,
me,
with measured temperature to make sure that you have the right gravity and you know what's
That's
going on.
another big one.
to me, the most important aspect of all of this is not necessarily knowing what changes you need to make. The most important thing is when you have a fantastic beer, you take your first glass off the keg and you go, "Oh my God, this is exactly what I want it to be be able to do it again."
Yes, exactly.
Exactly.
Especially when you fuck something up.
Yeah.
What did I do? Oh, I messed this
No,
up.
I screwed this up.
I got to
don't
make
remember
sure to
what I
get
did.
a stuck mash again next time.
Yeah, there you go.
Perhaps
I mean-
every time I brew this, I need to scoop all my mash out into another bucket, unplug this tube, and put it back in. And that's the only way to
Let's
make
hope
this beer
that's
Is
taste
there
not
a different way to
not
do
the
that? No, that's another big thing. Consistency is the mark
Right.
of a good brewer. You can make a good batch of beer. It doesn't make you a good brewer unless you can do it again.
Well, often the best mistakes are often the greatest discoveries.
Well,
right?
and you know, I can't believe how rare it is to find brewers that understand the concept of brewing to a gravity and not to a volume.
Right.
We have talked about it over and over and over and over again on this show, and I still brew with people all the time that just have no concept of it. When we were doing the big brew at my house recently, I was like, "We got to stop running off right now." And they said, "Well, we're not at our gravity or our volume. It doesn't matter. If we run off anymore, we're going to be way off our gravity." You know, and there are very few people that have a concept of that, and I think
you
that
spend so much time
always
making that
been my
recipe.
goal is gravity first. I mean,
Right.
Yeah. You spend so much time making that recipe and tweaking. It's like, oh yeah, I'm going to use this many % of wheat malt to bring this out.
Exactly, right.
If you're going to forsake that just to make sure you have enough liquid, and then it's going to be watered down, it's going to be completely out of balance, not what you like, and then you're going to come complaining, man, it didn't turn out. I don't
or
know
the
what
other
went
way,
wrong.
or if it's too high a gravity,
Sure.
and you didn't run off enough. You know,
Yeah.
you're making a different beer, and keeping notes is that's one of the things that keeping notes will bring out to you. If you look at a batch over three or recipe over 3 different batches, and you notice that your gravity is all over the place, well, that might explain why I really liked it this time, and this other time I didn't like this. And you know, it's a data set that you can look at and maybe
Determine what the hell's
correlate
wrong.
with what you liked or didn't like about
Exactly.
your
Right.
results, because you hear that so many times from people about, man, I really liked it this time I made it, and everything seemed to go the same way this last time, but it just wasn't the same. But at the same time, they don't have any data to say that it actually did go the same way, and there probably was a difference. And
Right.
they didn't give themselves the ability to analyze it from batch to batch and know, well, the time that I really liked it is when this happened, and the time I didn't like it was when this happened. And you're guessing.
Right.
And personally, I like to dial a recipe in exactly like I like to make it. And when that keg goes away a lot sooner than I hoped it would, which
Right.
is usually what happens,
Yeah.
I want to be able to refill it again and do that same thing again.
Again
Exactly.
and
You know,
again
so-
and again. And the only way to
Right.
do that is with detail that you know
Right.
what the hell you did. Or else you're just, again, shooting in the dark.
You know,
So-
it's crazy. I went into the discussion thinking I was going to be the worst example ever, but now that I think about it, I do make notes on the things I need to.
Well, I see, this is the thing. We have, what we need to say is that we should promote the fact, like, you blog about your details.
Mm-hmm.
There are other people who put videos out on Facebook of the whole process.
Yes.
There are other
God
people who
bless them.
fill out notebook after notebook after notebook, and I've seen, like, Johnny Red's got a pile of notebooks of his
I record
brewing
phonograph
details
cylinders.
as he does it. Well, the key is that, like, that happens, and then there's the fact of most brewers who I think try to do something and make a few minimal details and remember some stuff and then hope for the best. Well, the next time you do it, you usually give a little more detail.
Sure.
Because you're trying to get back to whatever that one thing was. Well, the whole point is, had you done what you guys do in the first place, at any point, then you would get to that fact of, like, you have all of this information to get to where you want it to be to make that great beer. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, dude, seriously, you've done that for a while, and a lot of other people have too, that are all now becoming pro brewers because you've spent the time detailing your work enough to perfect what you want to have happen, enough to decide, I want to go and take it to the next level. So,
I know there's some companies out there that make brew logs type books. They're really nice. They have like leather bound covers.
Sure.
We wanted to carry them here, but I'm not going to spend $45 to make $5 on each one. But
right.
They're really nice if you want to find them out there. I think they're really expensive though, like $50 or something like that. But they're really
spend
nice.
Some money,
And see, it's kind of also it's also what do you brew with? Like on your brew day, do you print out a sheet and then you make you have a pen that you make notes on that, or do you use Beersmith on your iPad or stuff like that? Because I bought one of those journals. It wasn't like a real nice leathery one or anything, but it cost a little bit, and I think I've used that once. But I've got my Beersmith software on my iPad, and I can reference all the recipes I've come up with and everything right there. And it's just a little more me, I guess.
Yeah,
so
it comes down to personal taste.
Yeah, you have to tailor. What do you use on your brew day?
And
make your
use
notes
what works
through
best
there.
for you, because
Yeah,
that's what
right.
you'll consistently do.
And that's what you'll be more consistent
And
with.
for me, it's personally, I don't go anywhere without this notebook. It's a part of me, and I always have a yellow notepad in there. That's my majority majority of my brew day notes, or any notes anywhere for anything, is on yellow notebook paper. But you can go to Beersmith, print out your brew day log, or you can go to Brewer's Friend, or you can go to your recipe that you created on Stubby's website and just check things off as it goes into the mash, as it goes into the strike, as you measure these things. It can be as simple or as complex as you'd like it to be. I don't personally have an iPad, so I can't do Brewsmith, but I've got a laptop. If I really wanted to, I could get super technical and go in there and hackerman my way through my brew day. But for me, it's simple to just find a writing utensil, put it on this yellow page, and then this goes in my notebook.
And see, that's the only reason I mentioned it, because I have 10 of those types of planners and notebooks and things that I'm always like, I'm going to get organized and do it this way, and I never touch them. But with my iPad, I'll write it down. I've got loads of notes in here that I would never write down by hand.
Hell, half of my business model came from me sitting on the crapper with my notes on my iPad, or not on my iPad, my iPhone. I was like, oh, that would be a really good idea. Let me type that out. Just documenting things does not hardly take any time. It's free for the most part, and unless you value your time.
So do your
you
notes
can do that with
something
one-
like 40% Pilsner, 20% Munich, 40 IBUs of Magnum.
And you can type that out with one hand and then use the shit knife with the other.
Right, multitasking. That's all I'm saying. If you take nothing away from this, it's do your best thinking on the toilet.
No, I agree.
Oh, it was a poop knife. I'm sorry.
Not to move on from the poop knife to this, but you did bring us one beer tonight that you had, and I want to talk about this just because of the fact that this is something I'm sure you worked at for a little while, that you took notes on, and that you got to a certain point that you wanted it to be. Brandon's going to argue with this about the name of this beer, but why don't you tell us a little bit about what you brought us tonight? It's starting to get warm now. I'm sorry about that, but
it's going to help us bring out some flavors we wanted.
It's probably about the right temp, actually.
Yeah, it tastes pretty good to me right now.
So the beer we're about to drink is a beer that I brewed with Michael Harper of OHB. We spent a lot of time.
Oak Highlands Brewing.
Excuse me, Oak Highlands Brewing. Yeah.
Yeah, you know me.
You down with OHB?
Yeah, you know me.
Wow.
He's been a friend of ours for the last couple of years. We met him actually through the blog and through our other podcast, and he and I just started texting back and forth, and we would throw out ideas like, what if we made this, or what if this is this style with this different in it? And so this idea came from, we both really like English IPAs, but we love what Belgian yeast can do to a normal standard ale or a clean ale. So this is a Belgian Belgo-English IPA called, and I'm sorry if we're about to lose listeners, Die Hard is not a Christmas movie.
We just lost every listener.
You just lost Brandon for sure.
So the beer, we brewed this on the pilot system there, and it was released around Christmas time, and it was meant to create a conversation around the beer. It's, Michael has a little bit more of a dog in the fight than I do, but he made the point that Die Hard could take place around any other holiday, and it would also not be that holiday's movie. Like July 4th, he wants to go home for a barbecue, and he gets caught in the flipping tower and has to crawl through the duct, and yippee-ki-yay. It's not a July 4th movie. It's an action movie.
Brandon's just grinning.
And he's biting his
not
tongue.
just grinning.
He's
I'm
bleeding.
not just, I'm like
Everybody on here is going boo on Facebook.
Yeah.
thank you.
That
Thank
is
you, Come
exactly-
and Brew It community.
That's-
You have
that's the
restored my
response we
faith in
wanted.
humanity.
That's the response we wanted.
I don't remember Die Hard coming out at Christmas time though. I remember seeing
No,
that.
the beer came out at Christmas time.
No,
It
I'm
doesn't
talking about
matter
the
if
movie.
it came out at Christmas time, and you can't compare July 4th because July 4th is not the same type of holiday as Christmas.
It's a family gathering and celebration.
Oh, come
Yes.
on now.
Memorial Day, then.
I give myself
St.
gifts on
Patrick's
Memorial
Day.
Day. I'm just saying.
Born on the
Labor
4th
Day.
of July is not about.
He went home for Labor Day for a
Independence
picnic.
I would.
Independence
You know
Day is
what?
not about
I now
independence.
know that I don't need to erupt like the volcano on Hawaii right now in order to defend my position, because I can tell right now that all of our listeners here are going to go ahead and do that for me.
We apologize to our Hawaiian listeners.
The problem.
Jesus. No, but I mean, this reaction right that we're getting right now is exactly why we wanted to put it up there. If we had come up with some esoteric thing, people read that and they have
Feel
a
a hate
very
crime
strong
coming on.
They have a very strong reaction, either for or against. They're either like, yes, thank you, or they're
Mostly
like
against,
majority of the English-speaking Americans. Oh, you're so wrong. People wouldn't have tried it if it didn't say something like that.
Say something about the beer. Though.
Home Alone could have happened at 4th of July too, but Home Alone's a Christmas movie.
Yeah,
there have been
used
no
Christmas
ice
ornaments, though.
I mean,
He used them in his sabotaging.
and there
little-
was Winter.
Rube Goldbergs.
Winter was a large player.
And you
in
know
that.
what?
Yeah, there's
and you know
ice.
what? John McClane used a Santa suit when he sent down the first dead terrorist in the elevator.
Boom! He also used an Uzi. Thanks. No, I got an Uzi.
Well, I'm sure somebody's
Anyway.
got an Uzi for Christmas. I mean,
Right.
I mean, you guys
this is
didn't?
Texas. There's got to be
exactly.
a lot of Uzi
That's probably
Christmas
a whole lot of
presents.
Uzi Christmas
Yeah.
presents.
That was a
yeah.
Texas. It's probably a Browning.
Back in the 80s,
It's like
oh
the
my
number
God.
3 Christmas present in Texas, I think. Uzi. Yeah, Uzi. Yeah.
Getting back to the beer, though. So we wanted the fruity esters from Belgian, or excuse me, from British ale yeast, but we also wanted some of the characteristics, some of the spice to come through and accentuate. Mainly Hallertau, but I think we also put a little bit of Mandarina in there.
Yeah, I get that.
We kind of wanted it to be a little bit more aggressive fruit and spice combination for an IPA. So it's British in the sense that it has those esters, and it's Belgian in the sense that it kind of puts it in your face.
Right. I get.
And I get both of
what
those
you're
things.
saying exactly for what
That was
this
my
is,
first.
so.
My
And-
first sip, I thought it was peppery, and then my second sip, I got more of the fruitiness.
Yeah, and this particular one actually, we split this batch and did one straight and then one put in aged on oak. So this is actually the oaked version. And now that it's warmed up a little bit, a lot of the pepper, a lot of that
I'm
note
getting that
just
now, that pepper
pops
note.
right out there.
That pepper note's kind of coming out way on the back end.
I feel
Pretty
like
good stuff, man.
to me that I love everything about this beer in terms of how it tastes and all that, and I think it's one that suffers from trying to explain it.
True.
It unfortunately trying to explain what you're doing with it gets too.
I think the name's just clouding your
Well,
judgment.
No, it's not.
No, honestly,
no. Name
trying to
completely
explain
aside.
any English beer to an American.
It's just complex. Yeah.
Well,
and-
and
especially
English and
IPA,
Belgian
my
combined,
God.
yeah, it's just that the combination of flavors is really great, and trying to justify why this is in there and why that's in there, and this is
It's largely subjective.
it's a side effect of what we've done as craft beer drinkers in America. It's an American thing where we feel like we have to label the shit out of everything.
Well, even a Belgian American IPA makes
Yeah,
more
Mr.
sense to a large.
Schlongmeister
Group.
Esquire or whatever your name is.
Makes sense to a large
Inspector
group,
Schlongmeister Esquire, yes.
but an English IPA barely makes sense to most American craft beer drinkers. I mean,
Right.
it really doesn't. So it's like when you want to
that's
say that,
tragic.
that's
Yeah.
a whole
It's a beautiful
different
beer.
level
I
of
tasted that
ester
right
character
away.
and flavor than an American with a Belgian yeast applied to it. So it's like, man, you totally shifted it from one to the other, and it's like that. I think it works really well. It's just that's going to blow some minds. Like, what? What's this? What's going on?
Well,
here,
one
you
of
know?
the things, and I think it
I'm
was
still getting some toffee here. What's
Well, yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, you get hung up on a little detail here. Well, this should definitely have that.
shouldn't
or
it just be
shouldn't-
like
right.
citrus and clean and
Right.
bright? You know,
There-
Why
was
isn't
a-
it hazy?
There was a period of time where there was a Belgian IPA thing that happened. It was who was
yeah,
it?
they were all West Coast IPAs though. That the bases
What
of
was
all of them were
Fat
pretty
Tire?
Oh,
New,
Belgo.
new,
It's
New
called
Belgium,
Belgo.
Belgio. Yeah,
And
Was
I
a-
like that one.
That was a great beer.
Yeah.
I loved it. I used to buy it all the time.
Yeah.
And then it was like everybody just started shitting on these Belgian IPAs. You can't make that, blah, blah, blah. And they get hung up in this
They're
terminology.
amazing.
Belgian IPA.
Yeah, you get hung
It's
up
in your
in
glass.
trying to label something when I just thought it was a great tasting beer.
Sure.
And that's what this is to me. This is a great tasting beer that I feel like if you try and label it something, it almost starts to take away from what the beer is
Yeah.
because it's just brewed to taste good. You know,
Right. Yeah,
it's
we-
a cool
we
combination
literally-
of flavors. And
Yeah, the style doesn't
Yeah.
exist. We had like
Right,
several days
right.
of like, what if we did this different? What if we had this hop rather than doing this? What if we just fermented just a little bit warmer on
Yeah.
this side? It was all just what if questions that we're like, okay, well, there's no rule against it. The brewing police aren't going to come and slap us on the wrist. Let's make a fucking beer we want to drink.
That's what I
hops
love
did you
about
use
the
on this? Do you
small
remember?
the small regional brew, the neighborhood brewery like you're talking about. That's what I love about it.
Yeah,
Is
it
you can
helps
do that.
you.
You
The
can
smaller
do that.
size is like, okay, well, if it doesn't work, we've only got 5 barrels of
And
it
you
or
have
something.
direct contact with your consumer too.
Exactly. They can tell you why they don't like it or why they do
and
like
you
it.
can tell them what you were thinking too. There's an exchange there of ideas.
Exactly. Which is again back to record keeping, to know what you
Right.
did and
Precisely.
to
So
be
which
able
is
to
he's
give
doing
that
to
with the
answer
other-
Eric's question right now.
Okay, what hops did you use on this? Because it's like my thought is the fact that like an English hop is actually used in some saisons, so it's
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
We used we wanted to make sure parts of the recipe were true to their original style, so we used Hallertau, but I think we also put some Mandarina, Bavaria,
all right.
just
love
to
that hop.
bring it. Oh, it's so great.
Yeah.
It's it's like the honey malt of hops. Everyone
yeah.
loves to use it because it's just got
Yeah.
that character.
That one and the Hallertau Blanc, I'm a
Ooh.
big fan of.
Yeah, which really cool is we're actually bringing that in directly. I mean, bringing it in directly, not indirectly.
Directly in.
Bringing directly in.
Yeah, from Germany now, so it's
Nice.
super fresh.
Oh man, I love that hop.
Yeah,
Might need to talk to you about an order later.
yeah, there you go.
There you go.
But the thing is that
Love
what you use in
connection.
this is
they're not
actually
selling
used
it.
in just standard Belgian saison style. So I mean,
Yeah,
It's
it evens out, you know. Which is what a lot of people don't like about the American version of it is that the phenols don't play well with the citrus character and
Yeah,
the
yeah, you're right.
funkiness that a lot of American hops can have. I mean, you got to like it or you don't. And I know
Well,
a lot
it
of
can
people
be
who
it can
don't
be difficult
like
to
it,
get right.
so-
The same thing like with a dark sour beer.
right.
The roast notes don't play well with sourness. Yet the brewery does tart of darkness very
It's
well.
amazing.
So it
There's
can
a lot
be,
of great
it can
dark
be
sours,
done.
yeah.
It's just a difficult
I like that
thing
one.
to pull
I
off.
like that one that Sam Adams does too. I can't remember. It's like something hour or something.
Or like a,
yeah,
a
yeah.
sour
13th
brown ale
13th
from
hour.
Yeah, I know what you're
Yeah.
talking. That's a really
That was a
good
good
one.
one,
You're
too.
right.
interesting.
So it's difficult to do, but it can be done.
Sure.
Yeah.
How
So
they do
let's
it
talk.
with
Let's
their
talk.
notes.
So let's talk a little bit about taking one beer and breaking it out into several batches to treat different ways and how you do that. Obviously, note taking is incredibly important with
Right.
something like that.
Before you ever split something, you need to have a really good working relationship with that recipe. That's something you work on the base until you get to where you're ready to experiment with it. Yeah, you don't just go out there and immediately brew a beer and split it into 7 different little
Right.
1 gallons. So, yeah, I mean, you can, but you have no base to judge against. Notes are only useful if there are more than one brew
Well,
day
and
to
the beer is
compare.
only going to be good if the base beer is good to begin with.
Exactly.
Yeah, so we've talked about that a lot on the show, that make sure you get your base style down exactly like you want it to be before you start playing with it. So that's a really great point that you made right there.
Yeah, it's note-taking is great, but the purpose of note-taking is to compare notes. I mean, if you like your handwriting, that's great, but that's a hobby. That's not that's not useful in this exact application. You need to have a good base before you start splitting off. You also need to take the time and do some research. It's not going to kill you to go on, a forum or to ask Reddit at this point, or ask the internet. Do some research, read a book,
go to your local homebrew store.
Go to your local homebrew store. Talk to the people who have made hundreds of beers
Join a
exactly
beer
like the
club.
one you're trying to make.
Join a homebrew club.
Yes, just talk with other people, talk with other brewers, talk through processes, through ingredients, get an idea for what you want your beer to taste like, and then you have an educated guess. You have even better than, I'm going to brew this pale ale, and I'm going to use papaya, and I'm going to use lavender, and I'm going to use star anise. That's great if you really want those
frightened me.
flavors.
Crap, that sounds
It
delicious.
frightened me, actually. Yeah.
If you want to try those flavors, that's all well and good. But you need to have a basis for what you're trying to get
The
out
pale
of this
ale you're putting
experiment.
those things into better be good to begin with, because
Yes.
it's not going to get better
It better
by
be good to
putting
begin
those
with,
things in.
and
Yeah.
then if you're trying to accentuate certain things about the pale ale, which is what each flavor treatment should be, it shouldn't just be. If you're going to brew something to be a star anise like feature, then I mean, don't bother going crazy with your hops. I mean, make it to where that flavor comes out.
Right.
So know your base, then know what you're looking for in
Don't
each
be
of the
hiding
treatments.
anything, because a lot of people do that. Actually, even
Sure.
pros. I mean, a lot of professionals hide
And
things.
hell,
Yeah.
I've been guilty of that. I was a very insecure brewer at one point, and I didn't understand that the part of my process I needed to fix was my temperature control and fermentation. And then once I realized, a $75 temperature controller fixed that. Like, okay, well now it's starting to taste like what I want to. And then you get back to what you're trying to look for. So just
Right.
know your base, know what you're looking for, and take good notes. And that, I mean, hell, you can do that ad nauseum. You can make the same batch of beer 300 times with different treatments every single time, and you have a much more intimate knowledge of your recipe, of what the different adjuncts do, of what your flavorings do, and you're a much better brewer because you have the notes and you have a base of knowledge to build on for your next batch.
So once you start breaking it out, what's your process for that?
So, so you got a good recipe and you know what you're looking for. A good rule of thumb is if you are playing with dry hops, for example, pick a certain style of dry hops to do with a single batch. Don't split it out and dry hop this one with mandarina, and this one with mosaic, and this one with hallertau, and this one. You can do that, but you're comparing apples to oranges to bananas. Pick one style of beer and then dry hop it with 1 ounce of mandarina, 2 ounces of mandarina, 4 ounces of mandarina, and then go crazy on the fourth one. That way you know the variable that you're changing in that batch, and you have notes. You can compare in the same batch. You don't even have to spend extra time. Just you know what you're looking for, and you've got things that you can taste and look for. And then the next batch, okay, well, the 3 ounce of mandarina was the sweet spot. Awesome. Now I can see if I want to bring out some sweeter citrus with that. So maybe some orange peel. The next batch, you do the 3 ounces of mandarina, the dry hop, with 1 ounce of orange peel, 2 ounces of orange peel, 4 ounces of orange peel. Then you're actually building a recipe. Then you're not just throwing darts at a board blindfolded.
And you're able to see what each contribution individually does instead of doing 2 or 3 things at the same time and trying to pick out,
Right.
well, I think the orange peel is too much in this, but maybe it's not. Maybe the orange peel is just right, but the hops are affecting the flavor of that.
Mm-hmm.
And, when doing it a step at a time, you know how each one is affecting the other, and you can pick out the steps in there and know how to do it. So
Exactly. You never know if you're changing more than one variable, that's a recipe for disaster.
Right.
You're just going to keep beating your head against the wall because you
Right.
don't know what in the one beer that you like, you don't know what has changed for the better.
Yeah, I recently actually posted a blog about that with the one thing at a time. Make it simple.
Well, and we've beat on that over and over again
Layers.
for a long time. Is that, and I think the reason we do it is because over and over again you see people completely changing 2 or 3 things at a time. Well, I'm not sure
You
how
totally changed
how this
every-
beer came
yeah.
out, so I think I'm going to change the yeast.
Where are
use
you
a
at
different
now?
hops. And I'm going to lower my mash temp. Well,
You don't. Yeah.
when it comes out different, are you going to know what made the difference? Are you going to have any idea? So it's going to be a long, drawn out process, and we get a little impatient as homebrewers, newer homebrewers in
course.
particular.
Yeah,
That was the
of course.
hardest part.
You know, because it at the beginning it seems like it takes so long to make a beer.
Right.
Now it
Now I
doesn't
forget
seem
about
like that
beers.
anymore, right? Yeah, you know,
It's
you're
not
like,
the time that it takes.
shit,
it's
I've
more
got
like
4
the work
fermenters, I got a
involved.
keg, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's one of those things that changes over the arc of your brewing, and that's one of the reasons we feel like we need to harp on things like this and repeat things that we've said over and over again about taking notes and making small changes and how you break things out, is because the newer brewers, it just is difficult for them to get a handle on that. You get all excited. I remember Chris Farley and Tommy Boy, you know, getting all excited in front of a customer. He turns into JoJo, the idiot monkey boy, and that's how we all are when we're first homebrewing. Is we get so excited.
You bought the
first
bad
time,
brakes and the brakes. And
right? Exactly.
So help me God! The corners are going. Oh my God!
And the first time your beer comes out good, you're like, okay, great. Now I'm going to throw raspberries in it and put it on oak and put bread in it and age it on this.
Are you
and,
talking
know,
about Martin House's Kafka?
Man, that's exactly where my brain went.
Yeah.
But they didn't start out there,
No, they did not.
you know. So
That, you're right, exactly. I mean, that's the main thing about all of this is like you need to think about where you're coming from and what you're doing, but you need to dial in things in the first place. And the only way to do that is to know where you started from. And when you do that, you continue to add new things in each point to find out by little to what's going to make it better.
Mm-hmm.
And the good thing about that is that even if it's a blonde ale, you might add 5 different things to the same blonde ale that works out really well for you. It's going to teach you a lot about where that beer is going to go or what you want to do with it. That might be like, I might not make the regular one anymore. I might make the one that I dry hop, you know, or I add that fruit to or whatever.
Exactly.
That's what works the best. So, and it's like, I mean, that hopefully your educational brewery concept is going to work out well for what's coming. So, because I'd really love to see more people be into the educational part of it. So,
Yeah.
So we'd like to thank David for coming on tonight. I think this was a really good topic to cover because it is a fundamental thing that I think gets lost a lot of times in jumping from beginning to intermediate and not getting that fundamental base to do it. And we
Right.
talk about it all the time, and I think it's something that needs to be revisited on a regular basis to remind people. So I think it was a great conversation tonight.
Cool.
if you're in town, check out New Main Brewing in Pantego.
That's right.
You know,
Probably by
'cause
the
they're-
time this comes
yeah.
out, you'll be brewing.
Yeah.
Boy, I sure hope so.
So in future episodes, we're going to follow up on our New England IPA experiment with Turning Point Beer and our local home brewers. So check in with the collective about fruit additions and wood aging. We'll have them, in a week or two? We're going to have a collective?
2 weeks after. So
2
like
weeks? Okay.
mid-June.
Mid-June? All right. I'm looking forward to that. Hopefully I can make it because every time they're on, I seem to miss it, and they're one of my favorite breweries.
Well, when you're out of town, we'll have it.
Yeah,
Just make
probably.
sure to wear your sweatpants.
I don't have any sweatpants. I actually do not own a pair
He
of
burned
sweatpants.
them
Oh
all
my God!
on
dude.
purpose.
You've got if James is going to come
Your
in,
glitter
you've got to
pants,
come in
yeah.
wearing some sweatpants.
You know what I'm going to do is I'm going to go buy some sweatpants and then wear a tuxedo jacket with it.
Yeah.
And
That's
then
for NHC,
Then how
dude.
you going to talk shit about that?
Nothing
You know?
more business casual than that.
That's
We
right.
will be at HomebrewCon 2018, and Brandon might be
Yeah.
wearing sweatpants with a tuxedo jacket.
Hey,
So-
dude.
We are
I-
definitely going to be at HomebrewCon 2018, and we expect you all to come and find us, tell us how wonderful we are, and give us free beer.
and
Yes.
punch Brandon in the
It's
nuts.
the only reason we're going.
Hey, I did find me some sweet ass parachute pants. I talked about that.
Oh, shit.
Can't touch that.
I guess.
If you
We
wear
may-
parachute
we may
pants,
all lose
I
on this one.
promise to wear a hat.
See, he said the same thing that Nigel. It's this younger generation doesn't understand parachute pants.
Nigel's a younger
Oh, no,
generation.
man.
Well, no, Nigel's just
Parachute
he's
pants
English.
for the shit.
Yeah, you're thinking of
No, parachute
hammer
pants
are
were
different.
shit.
Okay.
They were shit.
No.
They were terrible.
No.
They
They were
had
awesome.
really cool zippers and
Yes,
stuff.
they
dude.
had
didn't.
wonderful, great zippers.
They had zippers.
Yes, they did.
They had zippers.
And
They
they
were
dried
not really
different
cool.
and
I tell you
fairly
what, though,
quickly.
when I go to the roller skating rink and you fall down, they'd melt on your ass, boy.
Right. So now I'm going to be wearing my
The roller
Cavaricis.
See, Cabaret.
roller ski.
I'm showing my
Continue,
age.
I don't know.
Brandon.
Do they make Cavaricis to go over a gut? I don't remember them. I don't know. All right. So again, please be sure to check out our Patreon account at patreon.com/Come and Brew It Radio. And you're hearing us talk about this a lot, and there's more benefits to this now than there ever have been before. We're doing giveaways and that kind of thing. We're going to continue to do that to try and help make it worth your while to help support us, just, in addition to all the great content that we're giving you. So go there to help support the show. We have $2, $5, $10, and $20 options because every little bit counts. Plus, we want to reward you while you help keep the show going, get involved, and improve it. In fact, we'll literally reward a lucky Patreon listener every live show with a random drawing, just like I just said a minute
because
ago.
we're way in the red on this show. I'm just saying.
Oh yeah. I'm personally way in the red on this show. So thanks again for listening to Come and Brew It Radio. Be sure to share with your friends on social media. Give us some ratings on iTunes and Stitcher, and to send any ideas or comments to info@texasbrewinginc.com. Also, you can always check in on the brew days of the guys at their Brew Focus Facebook pages at Brew with Stubby, Brew with Brando, Brew with Mikey B, Brew with Chris, Brew with Greg, and at Brew with Nigel.
Nigel.
That's the reason. That's the reason we make everybody Uber. It's because we don't want you to say, "Officer."
I think
Social media.
I think if you
Social
go back,
media.
if you were to actually go back and listen to any of these episodes, you would hear that every single time I say social media, and you guys go social media. And
I like how you're overpronouncing now.
completely-
Just
Probably not
to
every
overcome-
single.
you know why I'm overpronouncing it?
You know how often I listen to these? It's not every single time. But pretty close.
No,
You're
it's
almost there. You're almost there.
All right, guys.
more often than not.
Until next time,
Oh, it's getting sexy.
come and
in
brew
here.
it.
Come and brew it.
Come and brew it.
Thanks, David.
Brewed up. I'm brewed up. I'm brewed up. I'm brewed up. I'm brewed up. Turned up, bitch. I'm lost in the sauce. Turned up, bitch. I'm lost in the sauce. Brewed up. I'm brewed up. I'm brewed up. I'm brewed up.
Went all through that. I forgot we had.